Welcome to the Town of Avon Advisory Plan Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda, they are available on the tables to the right of the audience. We will be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda. As president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum and that all cell phones are set to vibrate or turned off. Any phone calls should be taken outside of the chambers. If you are interested in commenting during the public hearing portion of the Commission's deliberations, please sign up on the sheets located on the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to staff or to the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. During the conduct of the public hearing portion of the Commission's deliberations, the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present their case to the Commission. Remonstrators will have 10 minutes to present objections to the petition. Persons in support of the petition, other than the petitioner, will have 10 minutes to present support for the petition. And finally, the petitioner will close the public hearing portion of the presentation with a 5-minute rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed, no additional testimony will be heard unless it is solicited by members of the Commission during the question and answer phase of the Commission's deliberations. Subdivision plat and development plan petitions are ministerial requests, meaning that if the proposal meets the requirements set forth in the town's development ordinances, the Plan Commission must approve the request. In the interest of transparency, state law requires that the Plan Commission hold a public hearing, even if the development proposal must be approved. Responses to public comments and questions may be given once the public hearing portion is closed. We do understand that there may be several persons who wish to speak. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we would request that you not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. Again, welcome to our meeting, and please stand for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could do a roll call.
Catherine Ransberg.
Here.
Paul Guckenberger.
Here.
Bill Reed.
Here.
Jennifer Spencer.
Here.
Dave Kaufman is absent. Mason Pike is absent. And Greg Zusen.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Very good. We move on now to the approval of meeting minutes, and I noticed in our packet that we have meeting minutes from August, September, and October.
So the August and September ones were ones that you approved at the last meeting, but that didn't get signed.
Oh, okay.
So let's just be sure to sign those tonight.
Okay, very good.
So just October.
Has everybody had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes? Yes.
I did have a question in regards under subset 6.3 at the bottom of the page where public comment had been closed at 9:01 p.m. But it shows towards the bottom of the next page that we adjourned the meeting at 8:56.
I will amend that in consistency.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other corrections, omissions, errors that need to be addressed?
On page 2, very top of 4.2, the UDO tax amendment. There was a motion made, but there was no second made.
Okay, I can go back and amend that as well.
So should we put off approval of the meeting minutes until next week or next month when they're amended?
You can do that, or you can approve them as amended with these 2 corrections.
Okay. I think we should just go ahead and unless there's any objections, move to approve the meeting minutes as verbally amended, unless anybody objects to that.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. And we need to sign the other ones, which we can do at the end of the meeting. Move on to public comments. This is an opportunity for any of those who are present to speak about any items that are not on tonight's agenda. If you want to speak about something on tonight's agenda, you should wait until that particular agenda item is called. But if there's anyone who'd like to speak about something not on tonight's agenda, today is your opportunity right now to do so. Anybody have any comments? If not, then the public comments section for items not on the agenda is closed. Do we have any requests for continuances or agenda modifications?
We have 2 requests for continuances. The first one, DPR 2313, which is a convenience store development proposed at 1137 North Avon Avenue. We still have not received revised plans on that particular petition. We do need revised plans and to review those revised plans before it comes to you, because there were some fairly significant issues with the initial set of plans. Talking to the petitioner's representative, he wasn't sure if they could have those done by the December meeting, so the staff is requesting an additional continuance on that one, and that continuance is to the January 22nd, 2024 meeting. As you're well aware, the rules of procedure do have a limitation on the amount of time a continuance can be granted. In this particular case, that convenience store, you can grant continuances, but it does have to be heard in your March 2024 meeting date or a waiver of those standards of the rules. March 2024,
Okay.
the March 2024 meeting date. That's when it hits the 6-month time from the initial appearance on the agenda.
But this is going to be, you're asking that this be continued to January 2nd.
Right. So they're within the confines of the rules of procedure as far as continuance requests are concerned.
Okay.
The second item on the agenda, map P 2314 Harper Estates. In this particular case, the petitioner is doing a subdivision request utilizing the enhanced lot standards. They do have to submit elevations of the houses that they intend to use on the structures, since those have to be reviewed as part of the platting process, and they haven't done that yet. Petitioner anticipates submitting those elevations in time for the next meeting's submission, and therefore they are requesting a continuance to the December 19th meeting date. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on those.
Both of these fall within the maximum amount of continuance, correct?
Yes, it does. Harper Estates, this is their first time on the agenda. So they haven't been on the agenda before. They would have been under new business if they would have stayed on the regular agenda.
Any questions for staff on these 2 items? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the request for continuances?
So moved.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Would someone like to make a formal motion, or do we need to? Do we need to do that, or can we just approve it, yes or no?
Your motion is fine, and we can continue.
Okay. All in favor of continuing both items as requested by staff, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to old business. DPR 2314.
Yes, we have DPR 2314 Harvest Landing Lot 2. It's a request for approval of a development plan to allow for the development of 2 multi-tenant commercial buildings with associated parking, drainage, landscaping, and utility infrastructure. There's various petitions that have been heard for Harvest Landing in the recent years, as you well know. A variance 2314 Harvest Landing Lot 2 dumpsters was approved in the October 17th Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to allow for dumpsters to be placed along in the front yard along 900. We did hear this case at the previous October 23rd Plan Commission meeting. As a refresher, that was continued. You wanted to hear from our Public Works Director regarding the proposed access. You wanted staff to have more time to, and yourselves to have more time to review those, that access along 900. And while the Public Works Director is out of town right now, we do have the town manager here who can answer any questions that you would like answered regarding that access along 900. It's located at 8499 Dr. Charles Nelson Drive. That's Harvest Landing Lot 2. That's the last lot to be developed in the Harvest Landing Commercial Subdivision. It's 8.7 acres. Here it is depicted here. They said it's a request to approve a development plan to develop 2 multi-tenant commercial buildings with their associated parking, drainage, landscaping, utility infrastructure. The buildings are to be 32,000 square feet and 27,450 square feet in ground floor area. And the property is zoned C2 and it's located in Tier 3 of the US 36 overlay. Now here is a depiction of the site plan, proposed site plan with the most up-to-date plans for the ingress egress along 900 here. You were all given those updated plans in your packet to review. It looks a lot similar to what you saw previously. We do have a left turn lane leaving the site as well as a right turn lane as well. We have an extended pork chop that separates the southbound decel lane there, as well as an acceleration lane heading southbound as well. We talked about this here. Staff, we do find that the proposed site plan does meet the standards of the Unified Development Ordinance, except that it deviates in 2 aspects. One, they have a reduced landscape buffer to the north. The ordinance requires a 30-foot landscape buffer width. They only have 27.3 feet between the property line and the beginning of the parking lot there. So they're asking for a reduced buffer width, as well as building articulation standards. They can't meet those standards in just a portion on the north end of the building, and we'll go over those in more detail. Just want to give you a refresher. Waiver A seeks to allow for a reduced landscape buffer width. As I said, the ordinance requires 30 feet. They are asking for 27.3 feet. This is the landscape buffer in question here. To accommodate this request, they have planted more trees than is required by ordinance along that buffer yard there. So our ordinance requires a tree every 30 feet, and they have provided one approximately every 17 feet. So almost doubled the required plantings there. And we find that to be reasonable and favorable, and we recommend approval of that waiver. We have waiver B, which seeks relief from the architectural articulation requirements. Section 7.10 states that facades greater than 100 feet in length must incorporate wall plane projections having a depth of at least 3 feet and extending at least 20 feet. We agree with the petitioner's waiver justifications related to site constraints. We find that because of the parking lot, the drive aisle, and the minimum buffer width there, that they are unable to meet that, but they have provided it elsewhere. And we do recommend approval of that waiver. So this is the section of the building in question here for which they're seeking a waiver. Here's zoomed out, and it's just along here. They provided elsewhere throughout the building. With that, we do recommend approval of both waiver requests, and should those waivers be approved by the Plan Commission tonight, we do recommend approval of DPR 2314 Harvest Landing Lot 2 subject to 4 conditions. 1, that any revised plans comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted. 2, that a landscape bond is required per section 8.10G of the UDO, and the bond be provided to the town prior to the issuance of a C of O. The development shall comply with all relevant portions of town code and comments by Public Works, the fire department, and crossroad engineers at the pre-construction meeting, and plans shall be amended to include the most recent version of the Town of Avon construction standards.
The minutes should reflect that Commissioner Kaufman has arrived at 6:44.
Thank you, Bill. With that, I am available for questions.
Have a visual of this pork chop for the egress ingress?
I don't think I have a more zoomed
Other
in
than
one
that, right?
than what you have here.
So how deep is that, those stacking lines to go left and go right?
I don't know the exact length of that. There appears to be a few cars there.
My concern would be more to go left than it would be going right, because going left, you got to go across traffic. That's all I have.
So I did have a question on that too, and perhaps if Mr. Cannon's filling in for Public Works, he can address this question. But I mean, why did the design have a left and a right turn there instead of a right in, right out?
In discussions with the director, so the Director of Public Works is on vacation. In discussions with the Director of Public Works, he wanted an access that allowed for left turns at this location because he didn't want to overstress the roundabout down in the south. So he wanted sort of a release point for left-hand traffic because he was afraid that everyone would get funneled down to the roundabout, and the roundabout wasn't necessary. So the roundabout was designed after traffic counts were made along the road, but it was designed with the anticipation of having a left turn lane for Lot 2. That was part of the discussion between planning and Public Works over the course of this. Planning's thoughts were right in, right out. His concern was that the roundabout would be overstressed and clogged if there was not some way to get a left-hand turn from that northern curb cut, because the northern curb cut was originally part of the design of this subdivision when it went through the rezoning and plating process.
So did he provide any more comments then about left turn during peak times? And I mean, it's like we've talked about this and going out on 900 East. So I can get it between not being on peak times, but then that gets into other traffic concerns on 900 and restressing the proposed roundabout.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really get into any details with it. That was the discussions that we had about this particular cut. Because the petitioner originally did propose to move it north and to have it to be right in, right out. But the Public Works Director was pretty adamant that there needed to be some left turn. The Public Works Director's preference was that it be a full access, but there was a lot of concern about left turn lanes on 900, and we just didn't have the right of way to install them. So that was the reason this came about, to allow left turn lanes out of the development, but to preclude left turn lanes into the development. I don't know if that answers your question, but we didn't get into any of the details of the counts and the number of cars leaving the development at that cut.
Okay.
Any further questions for staff? If there are no further questions for staff, we'll ask the petitioner to come forward.
Dylan Reynolds with Space Co., the civil engineer at 3850 Priority Way South Drive, Suite 110, Indianapolis. Thanks for hearing us back again. Like Bill and Ian have explained, I think last time we left off this, it was really the main concern was getting the Public Works approval for this entrance to County Road 900. So like Bill said, our original recommendation was a right in, right out, but the Public Works Director wanted that left turn movement out northbound onto County Road 900. So in order to meet their requirements, this is the Public Works approved access point. So I can answer any questions you guys have that I have an answer to.
Do you think that's a positive or a negative to your development then? Seeing you're getting credit to Public Works.
My original recommendation was right in, right out, just to avoid that left turn lane from our development to northbound County Road 900. Since you do have the roundabout, it's a little safer, just a few hundred feet south, just to keep all the traffic flow in that direction. But it was Public Works direction to add that left turn lane out. And I was not involved in traffic study. All the traffic studies and counts for that roundabout and this development as a whole was done by a third-party engineer in the town, I believe.
This may be a question better addressed to staff, but do we have a feel for the safety of this particular configuration? I know we've got a similar one on Avon Avenue coming out of the Kroger parking lot just north of 267. Almost identical.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the right in, right out has been designed to preclude any left hand. So, I mean, the biggest problem with something like this is that you design it so that there's no right left turn into the development, yet people still find a way to make a left turn and then clog up traffic at that location. In this particular case, there is none. I mean, the biggest safety concern is for people stopping in the through lane, trying to make a left turn into the shopping center. What's going to happen with the people making a left turn out of the shopping center from this curb cut is they're going to have to wait a long time during peak times. During off-peak times, they shouldn't have to wait that long. But during peak times, they're going to have to wait quite a while to make that left-hand turn out of that shopping center. So traffic along 900 shouldn't be affected all that much, other than there'll be an increase in traffic along the roads. But the biggest impact is going to be people who are attempting to make a left turn out of this location are going to have to wait quite a while.
But theoretically, that's not the only exit not theoretically, that is not the only exit they have.
No, it's not.
They can go south and then they'll be able to use the
Right.
roundabout to head north.
They can go to the roundabout and head north, but people do what people do. And if there's a long line waiting to get into the roundabout, they'll try to come up here. And even if they have to wait longer up here, at least they'll feel a little bit better because they're closer to the road.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you. We'll now take public comment.
Thanks.
Is there anybody who would like to address the commission on this particular issue? Go ahead. Yep. You should come to the podium and state your name and address.
Yes, I'm Ron Fraser, 8806 Prairie Trail, Avon. My issue with this is not the Ace Hardware. I understand it's within zoning, all that's fine. My issue is the entrance and exit to 900. I live off 900. I only have one entrance and exit on 900. It's a mess trying to turn left, as the planner just mentioned. We have to wait quite a while to turn left, and we have no choice but to do that. My understanding was that originally the Ace Hardware did not have an entrance and exit to 900 at all in the original plan. They were made to put that in. The amount of traffic on 900 now is ridiculous. The mentioning of the roundabout is going to be stressed. I believe it will be stressed because the way in which that whole development is made is that it's more favourable to people to come down or on 900 and to get into the Costco in that area than it is to come off 36. The way that's been planned has been terrible. So instead of them coming in off 36, they all come in through 900. We are getting a large amount of traffic on that road, and to have a turn left there for a start so close to roundabout is just insane. I don't understand what people are thinking here. Sorry, I might be getting a little bit emotional. I apologise, I'll pull back. Look, I think that there should be no entrance or exit to 900 in that position. They should use the roundabout. That's what the roundabout was there for. If it stresses it, that means that there's way too much traffic on 900. Simple as that. If you can't handle that amount of traffic, then what you're doing is simply pushing more traffic up to us, just up the road to the left, to the north of that point. And we are trying to get in and out of our properties, and we can't. So Ace Hardware, wonderful, great. We look forward to having them there. But I don't believe that we should have that extra entrance and exit onto 900. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to address the commission on this particular agenda item? If not, then public comment for this agenda item is closed. Discussion or rebuttal, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would just say in response to that he was correct that our original proposal did not have an entrance at all, and it was installed at the request of Public Works.
Okay. Discussion.
So I'm concerned about the left turn out of here. If there's I understand about the ingress and egress being new added to that, but if there's going to be an ingress and egress, I think it's a right in, right out to try to allow traffic to cross the traffic lanes to go northbound. We're basically ignoring a potential safety issue here. I mean, we see that at Kroger where people are waiting and then they weave their way out between stopped cars when it's queued up. We already know there's a lot of traffic on 900. So to ignore that and approve this with a left turn going northbound on 900, when we're already talking about traffic issues, which will come up in the next case, I can't vote for this. I don't think it's a good design and I won't support it. And Ryan, if you want to add any more comments for Public Works since they're not here, be glad to listen to that. But I do not understand the need for a left turn going on to an already crowded road during peak hours. Now we're just talking peak hours because non-peak hours is not the issue here, but during peak hours, like now, it's going to be dark. We're going to have issues there. If there's not sufficient lighting there, that even causes more issues. So as you can tell, I'm very adamant about this. I will not support this design. I will not vote for this.
I agree with regards to the lighting especially because, I mean, this is almost an exact duplicate of what we have at Kroger and there's insufficient lighting there as well. And pulling out of there at night is thank God we have headlights on cars, I guess.
Does anybody want to address the Public Works Director's email dated the 27th of November? Everybody got a copy of that? Even if we deny the left turn What about light? Available light values are,
So on your desk, you should have a approval letter from the Public Works Director in which he mentions adding more light as a condition.
It also should be noted that when this was studied back in 2000, there was an access point right here. So during the rezoning, there was an access point right here. Why the Public Works Director pushed it south was because we didn't have right-of-way north of here to put in an accel and a decel lane. So the Public Works Director had them remove the access point here, move it to the south here, and then do a right out, and then left out, right out, and then right in, but no left in. So that's the design that's been approved by the Public Works Director.
Ryan,
Yeah, there was always, there's been some confusion. There was always a cut up here on the north side, even back in 2000. So it was always part of the plan.
Thank you, Ryan Cannon. I'm the town manager. I think Bill made a good point. I guess one thing, I am the town manager now, but when this development actually occurred, I was the public works director, and I was a public works director for 22 years prior to that. So I have a little bit of background on this and a little bit of understanding. And the first thing I wanted to share was what Bill just shared. In the original design, there was actually an access point, and that was important. So we're talking about traffic here. And when we talk about traffic, one of the important things, traffic is like water, and access points allow traffic to dissipate. The more options we give people, the better the traffic flows. When we try to funnel everybody into one spot, traffic doesn't work as well. So we want to have multiple access points. We talk about this all the time. Our Unified Development Ordinance requires, if you have a certain number of houses, that you have to have more driveways. Why do we do that? Because we want to dissipate traffic. So now we're here talking about a commercial development that's enormous, and we're going to try to funnel everybody and all the traffic into one location. That's not ideal. That's not what we want to do with traffic. We want to give people as many opportunities to be able to get out of the development as possible. So is this ideal? No, maybe not. Would it be better to the north? Yes, maybe. Does that cause problems for another development that may occur to the north? Yes, it does. So we're trying to make the best of the situation with what the land has given us. The second thing I wanted to add is this is not the same situation as the Kroger. That design is not the same as Kroger. Actually, it's very different. One, Kroger has a left in. This does not have a left in. Kroger, the traffic on Avon Avenue is much higher than the traffic is on County Road 900, regardless of what people tell you. Yes, there's a lot more traffic on County Road 900 than there used to be, but in terms of how much traffic is on 900 compared to Avon Avenue, it's not the same. Third, the separation between the driveways are substantially different. There's a huge gap. I know you guys are looking at it on a plan, but in terms of separation from the roundabout to this drive, it's fairly substantial. You guys are exactly right. That left turn will operate at a poor level of service. And what people will do is they will learn that if they really want to go left, that they probably shouldn't go there and that they should actually use the roundabout. But that doesn't mean that you want to take away the ability of them to be able to do it. If in an off-peak time, they can go another way, we should want to give them another alternative to be able to get out. So that's why this is a good design. There's nothing wrong with this design. This design is 100% safe. It's designed by engineers who are qualified to design road improvements. Road designs are not unsafe. People driving cars are unsafe. So there's nothing wrong with this design. It's perfectly safe. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Were any other alternatives considered to what we see today? Were there any other public safety? And I'm not 100% conversant with all of the requirements in terms of, what requirements do you have for a four-way stop or for a stoplight or for a roundabout or a right in, right out. But were there any other options considered other than what we have now?
Sure, all those options were considered. There was a full access entrance was considered, a right in, right out was considered. The traffic volumes don't warrant the kind of traffic volumes we would expect for a roundabout or a traffic signal. And so there's certain warrants that we expect to meet, which means there's a certain amount of traffic that's coming to there. That entrance wouldn't meet those requirements for a traffic signal. We wouldn't want to do a four-way stop. But when we do these analysis, we consider everything. And it's not just the town and our engineers review it, but the developer has an engineer that reviews it as well. And then we have a third-party engineer who reviews it too. So we have this group of people that are all looking at these things together. And then we come to a decision on what we think is the best thing for that area. And that specific situation, each situation is unique. The situation with Kroger is unique into itself, but it is very different than this. The roundabout at Charles Nelson Drive and County Road 900 is going to be significantly better than what the situation is at Kroger. It's got a light at 36. It's going to have a roundabout, and this is going to be the third access point. This isn't a primary access point. So the majority of people will learn that this isn't the best place to turn left, except for in not peak times, at which point it's safe for them to be able to turn left.
Turn left going north on 900, you're
Turn
talking
left
about.
to go north, correct. But they're not allowed to turn left in.
So to the point you made, now I'll grant different than Kroger. My intent of the comment, though, I'll still stand by that we're potentially acknowledging a unsafe condition. Now to the ingress egress that originally was north of that, had there been in consideration or recent discussions with a potential development going in there to bring those two ingress egress points together so that it would serve both the development to the north and this commercial development?
Yeah, I believe Steve actually I think he's connected their engineers together as well as with our engineers, and we're having those discussions. But I believe from those discussions, that's how we decided it was actually better to push it further south, to be able to give them sufficient space to be able to do what they need to do to get a left into their development as well, because that will need a left turn as well on 900. So that separation is actually beneficial to us, which is probably why Steve recommended that it actually be moved further south.
What if I like the right in, right out. I don't like the left turn. You make your intersection wide enough to maybe incorporate that at a future point in time, but not initially. Make everything go right in, right out. And I say that until you get the roundabout in place and to see what stress there is on the roundabout, or see if it creates gaps, then you could go left.
Well, I don't know what the timing of this development is. I only know what the timing of the roundabout design is. And the roundabout we're planning to bid in February, and by August, it's going to be done. You can have the petitioner get up, but my guess is the roundabout's going to be done before this road improvement opens up. And again, I don't believe that this development will stress the roundabout. The roundabout is designed and has the capacity to handle the traffic based on the traffic study that was done for the Harvest Landing development, plus 20 years of growth. So it allocates a substantial amount of capacity to be able to handle the traffic for this development for now and into the future.
But doesn't that contradict what we were told, which was that the reason for this particular design was to reduce stress on the roundabout?
The concern is that you're funneling the traffic. So I think we're confusing terminology.
Okay.
We would prefer for there to be as many outlets to the development as possible. If ultimately, in a long period of time, eventually it would put stress on the roundabout if there's no other options for people to be able to get out. So that's why this provides value, because it creates another outlet to eventually take stress off of the roundabout. Doesn't mean that there's stress now. Remember, we're doing it based on future traffic growth. Nobody really knows what the actual traffic's going to be. We're doing it based on projections of what people think the development's going to do. So at some point, yes, it may stress the roundabout. Might it be 18 years before it stresses the roundabout? Yes. If that's there, may it be 25 years before it stresses the roundabout? Yes. And that's the value of, it will extend the life that we need to not be concerned about how that roundabout functions.
So that leads me to Greg's point about if if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that you're not anticipating stress on the roundabout right now or in 5 years or 10 years. You're talking about quite a while down the road when stress will affect that roundabout. So if that is the case, then does it not behoove us to wait and see what the stress is looking at? It seems to me it would be, and I'm not an engineer, don't pretend to be an engineer, don't, not public safety, don't do any of that. That's why we ask you guys these questions. But turning that from a right in, right out to what we see presented doesn't, is it a major construction project to do that? I mean, I know it can be inconvenient, but I mean, it's, I don't know. I'm leaning towards what Greg is saying here.
No, it's not, but it's not a public street. So I think we're confusing a driveway with a public street. The town doesn't have jurisdiction to change that drive. The developer in the future would have to make that choice to then do it. The town couldn't force them. This is our opportunity to do it. So I'm going to tell you that I want them to do it now, and that the town doesn't have to try to come back and try to fight with the developer in the future, which may or may not still be here. We don't know who it'll be or when it'll be, and try to get them to do it later when it's needed. So I would rather them do it now. So we're trying to plan and have a good plan in place to address the traffic for now and the future. So I would say no. I wouldn't ask to do it later. I'd say do it now.
Because we might not be able to ask it,
Correct. Or we may not be able to force them because there's no way to force them to do it.
because there's no mechanism for the town to go in and say, hey,
Correct.
you need to fix this exit.
That's correct. Or if they would, then the town would potentially have to pay for it, or we'd have to buy the right of way. Now we're trying to buy commercial property from a developer to try to force them to do it, or for us to pay for it ourselves. Now we're asking taxpayers to do it. So I would say I'd prefer that not happen.
What if the developer agrees to do that now, or let's answer that question first. If the developer agrees to put it in now, but the town and dedicate it to the town, or whatever we have to do, and the town then can determine, it's like a stoplight, when to turn it on, when to turn it off. That way it's our decision. They've given us the ability to make that determination.
Dan, I see you rubbing your forehead.
Ryan, don't run away. I just want you to clarify a couple things for me. So has the town requested that this access be designed as it is submitted?
Yes.
And so this is what this proposal that's contained in the DPR is exactly what the town is requiring and imposing on the petitioner.
That's correct.
Okay. Now you will remember, we've not only said it 100 times, we say it in our introduction, that this approval is non-discretionary if they comply. And as the staff report says, they have a compliant proposal, I might say compliant with even this that the staff has said, and the subdivision control ordinance allows us to impose certain demands upon access ways. The only thing that we should be talking about are the two waivers, neither of which are related to traffic. And I know that you're not comfortable. I get it. But our ordinance says staff does this sort of decision-making. This is not a rezone. This is a DPR. And so that makes this part of the case ministerial.
So I do have a question on that. And looking through the staff report, we have nothing in here in the DPR where we consider safety. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say it again.
There's nothing in here that explicitly talks about considering safety that we would point to, say this doesn't meet any safety concerns. No criterion, no, there's.
Correct.
there's
It's
nothing.
well, it says traffic circulation and that involves safety.
So the only thing that I would point out is in number 8, it's incomplete. We have an engineering review. It's not been completed yet. Until that complete, I would say that I could take the position the DPR is not complete. Or the waivers, like you said, the waivers have to be granted to make this ministerial.
That's true, but we're not talking about the waivers, and the waivers have nothing to do with traffic. See, that's my concern. We should be talking about the waivers because we're going to have to deal with them first. But if you as a planning commission member just disagree with the staff, we've got a problem.
So
Because we're not all in the same lane. We don't all have the same job.
Okay.
So
So,
I hear you, but you see my concern, which is that you have discretionary review of 2 waiver requests, and then you have ministerial review of the rest of it. The petitioner is not proposing this traffic alignment. The staff has done so. They have the power to do that in the subdivision control ordinance. They're the ones who decide what's safe and what is appropriate in terms of these movements. And again, unless you find that the proposal is not compliant with the ordinance, then I think we're talking about the wrong issues. That's all I'm trying. I mean, really, we need to be talking about the waivers. And again, I think that to the extent, I think Mr. Cannon knows that some of you disagree with staff. I think he heard that. But our job is to consider a DPR, which has 2 waivers and which is otherwise ministerial approval. So I guess we can voice what we think is a bad design that the staff's imposed, but that's really not our job.
so Dan, just to get into the weeds in this a little bit. So our ministerial authority also applies to staff recommendation. Also, I just want some clarification as to staff recommendations. I mean, it's a staff recommendation that sometimes we disagree with staff's conclusions.
Sure.
So how would this,
What part of the ordinance don't you think they're in compliance with? I think that would be your burden to identify that if that's what you were going to do and say, we disagree with Mr. Peebles. He said that they're in compliance with our ordinances. And so this is the ordinance they're not in compliance with.
okay,
And again, you can do that if you can.
right?
And if that's how you feel you can. But again, if it's that you don't like the traffic plan that the town is trying to impose, you have to remember, it's not the petitioner's idea, then I think we're barking up the wrong tree, is what I think. I really do.
Thank
And
you
I
for
also
bringing us
think-
back to this. So let's talk about, we've heard the concerns, so let's talk about, are there parts of the ordinance that we think have not been met?
I'll bring it up. As Dan pointed out, there's 2 waivers here that we have to consider, the architectural standards
And the
and
landscaping?
the landscaping. And if I remember, we went over the architectural standard quite a bit, and last time we discussed this. No,
Sir.
all right now.
So let's get to the waivers. The first waiver has to, or let's talk about the articulation, or no, the landscaping waiver. They're asking to reduce it from 30 feet to 27 point something feet. I don't see that that is significant enough, especially considering the other constraints of the lot and the placement of the road, et cetera, for that to be something to object to.
I make a motion, we approve waiver A of the UDO, chapter 6.8 D1, a request to allow for landscape buffer with width of 27.3 feet, subject to no conditions.
Second.
We take a vote?
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guggenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Jennifer Spencer,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Motion carries. Waiver A is approved.
Okay. The second waiver has to do with the articulation of one section of the east side of the building, I guess it would be. Is that correct? Where am I looking?
Ian, can you put up that overhead that depicts this small section that we're talking about? And I think you talked about last time, that's where the trucks go through, back and forth there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the access there, the rear access here.
Paul, do you want to recap the discussion from the last meeting with regards to articulation? Okay.
If there's no further discussion, I make a motion, we approve waiver B of EDO Chapter 7.10D, a request to allow relief from the architectural articulation requirements subject to no conditions.
I'll second.
Let's take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guggenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Jennifer Spencer,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Motion carries. Waiver B is approved.
Which brings us back to the request for development plan review. I understand what council's told us with regards to, and appreciate what council's told us, reminding us of what our role is here. We have administrative and magisterial, or discretionary and magisterial duties. This is magisterial. And he is correct in that unless we find that we disagree with staff's interpretation of ordinances, our dislike of the design cannot be rejected, I do not believe.
So because it's ministerial, I'll move that we approve DPR 2314 Harvest Landing Lot 2 as written by staff in the staff report and with the conditions as defined in the staff report.
Second.
Take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guggenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Jennifer Spencer,
4.
Dave Kaufman, Greg Zuzen.
4.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you.
Move on to ZA 23-05.
ZA 2305, Village Place Townhomes 2. This is a request for zoning amendment change to change the zoning of the property from R2 Mixed Residential District to R4 Multifamily Residential District to allow for the development of an attached single-family residential development consisting of a maximum of 80 dwelling units Again, this is another case, just has a brief history of it. There've been a couple of land use petitions on this one, a withdrawn zoning amendment from about a year ago, and then an approved primary plat for 32 or 34 single-family residential units on this property. Though the obviously subdivision plat, while it was approved, has been abandoned, and so this is a request to rezone this property to allow for the denser development of 80 units rather than the 34 that would be permitted by right. Property right here, and you're all familiar with it because it's immediately north of the property that we've just been talking about. It's an L-shaped property. It originally was part of this, this church was all part of one. And then this portion of it was sold off, and this portion was retained by the previous church. This has gone through a full hearing. So this did receive a full hearing at the October Plan Commission meeting. And one of the primary concerns expressed at this hearing was related to the impact of the development of traffic along County Road 900 East. Now, the petitioner had taken that back, and they had commissioned a traffic operational analysis at this particular location. That analysis was conducted, and it indicated that the proposed development would have a minimal traffic impact along County Road 900 East, just because it's a residential development, and that there would be a small amount of peak traffic there generated by the site, somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 cars in and out of the property during the peak hour, with a little bit more on the off-peak hours. The level of service along County Road 900 East, according to the transportation analysis, will not be significantly impacted in an adverse way. However, there will be wait times out of the development during those times. So the level of service along the county road is going to remain roughly the same. The level of service coming out of the development, however, will be B in the morning and C in the evening. Both of those two things are considered acceptable levels of service. There were 3 recommendations from that traffic operational analysis. The construction of an eastbound full access drive, obviously that's the public street associated with this development, for a lane in and a lane out. The construction of an exclusive northbound left turn lane along County Road 900 East. And the intersection should be stop controlled with access drive stopping for County Road 900 East. So it'd be a basically one-way traffic stop right there, stopping traffic from exiting the end of 900 East. All 3 of these requirements are requirements that the ordinances would already require. And these are things that we would have required at the time of platting, regardless of the outcome of this traffic impact study. Because that was the case, the Public Works Director did agree with the outcome of this traffic operational analysis. The shopping center to the south was the subject of a traffic study in 2020, 3 years ago, associated with the rezoning of the property for commercial purposes. And the traffic study had 9 recommendations associated with it. Of those 9 recommendations, 8 of them have been executed with the development of this property. The only recommendation that has not been implemented is the recommendation to build capacity into the roundabout at 100 North and County Road 900 East. And that basically has been done because that roundabout is not within the town's authority to build or increase the capacity of. The town, in addition to all of the 9 recommendations that were, 8 of the 9 recommendations that were done with the development of this shopping center, the town is in the process of constructing or will be constructing a roundabout in 2024 at Angelina Way and 900 East, and that was studied as well. And so the design accommodates the traffic as anticipated up to 20 years, as you've heard earlier. This graphic here shows you, because I think this is something the Plan Commission wanted to see, is the different entities that have ownership of County Road 900 East. It's difficult to see, but red is the state of Indiana, yellow is the town of Avon, and blue is Hendricks County. And so you see along this roadway areas where it transitions from the authority of the town to the authority of the county, back to the authority of the town, back to the authority of the county. And of course, all improvements that are done right here are under the authority of the state of Indiana. This shows a notional layout of possible land uses here. And I say possible only because this area right here is a little bit up in the air. So this area right here is 2 single-family dwellings currently. This is the proposed development up here. This right here is the layout of Lot 2, showing you the access points here and here. This area, when this development happens, we would eliminate the 2 access points for residential driveways on here, requiring this development to backload off of Angelina Way. And then, of course, right down here, you see the design and the construction of the roundabout at this location. So there is a lot of holistic thought given to the development in this area. But of course, what we're looking at is an area here that was a massive cornfield and I think 7 single-family residential lots. And now it is a significant retail development with all of these outlots either developed or one of them, I believe, is still under development, and then this lot being under development. This we don't believe is going to happen, this hotel right here. These properties were zoned C2, but we believe that the owner of this hotel has abandoned their option on these properties and instead at some point in the future is going to develop this area right here. So while we show this on here, this is not necessarily how this will end up. There will probably be some changes at this in this area right here. This is a close-up of the roundabout and how it's going to be designed. It's a little bit off center, so it's heading towards this way because of the existing right-of-way that we have here and the drainage facilities that are here. So we've kanked it a little bit off center here, but this will show how the roundabout will function down here to increase the efficiency of traffic along 900 at this location. And then this, of course, is the development proposal for 80 lots. We continue to recommend approval of this petition. We continue to recommend that the Plan Commission forward a favorable recommendation. We have shown the 3 staff conditions up there, or the commitments, I should say, up there that the staff has requested. I think at your stations, you have the 3 condition or commitments that the petitioner has agreed to at the previous meeting. Those were a commitment limiting the number of units to 80. Holy moly, you'd think I could remember this thing. There was no on-street parking, and then there was one more that I can't recall. The required architectural standards shall be that of single-family dwelling. Oh, no, I'm sorry. A 50-foot tree conservation and buffer yard shall be maintained along the northwestern portion of the site, and that would be located right about here. Now, we've structured that to say a tree conservation easement because the petitioner had indicated during his hearing that conservation, that there may be some trees that have to be removed from that area to install infrastructure and also to grub up some of the old dead trees and those sorts of things. So we didn't want to call it a tree preservation and give the impression that the way it lays out right now is the way it will always be. But if the petitioner did make the case or did make the commitment that in the case that they do have to remove a tree, they will have to plant 2 new trees to replace that tree for every tree removed. Again, we do recommend approval. In this particular case, it's subject to the 6 commitments that you have in front of you. The 3 made by the petitioner at the previous hearing and the 3 made by the staff or requested by the staff. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So Bill, I got a question on the commitments. This is rezoned and it's approved to change the zoning, do the commitments survive if the developer decides not to do the development? Do the commitments stay with the property and the rezone? So any new developer would have to abide by those commitments?
They would, yeah, I mean, they would. So those commitments would be reduced in writing to a form that's recordable in the office of the Hendricks County Recorder. I typically do that the day or two after the meeting, after the town council has taken an action on it. And if they've approved it, then I do those commitments. It's usually reviewed by our council. And then if they approved that, then it's handed to the petitioner.
Okay.
When it goes through the plating process, the ordinance specifically states that we have to receive the recorded commitments back before the Plan Commission can hear a primary plat on the property. So yeah, we make sure that the commitments are recorded, and those commitments would go with the property, and subsequent developers would have to comply with those. If they didn't want to, then they would have to come to you and do a modification of commitments. And you saw that in Turner Trace a couple times, where Turner Trace had commitments that were made in 1996, and development has changed out there, and they wanted to eliminate some of the commitments. You modified some, you refused to modify others, specifically the gas station requirement there at Turner Trace.
Okay.
So yeah, these commitments would run with the property, and subsequent developers would be constrained by them.
And with the way the commitments are written, it would prohibit any type of apartment building. So with the apartment building small and apartment building large, that covers all apartment buildings. So
Right.
no apartment buildings could be built.
Right, yeah. They're basically constrained to townhomes and single-family dwellings and maybe duplexes. And I have to take a look at the commitments. But we have no reason to believe that the townhome development wouldn't be built on the property.
Could you bring up the map showing 900 and the various jurisdictions that fall on 900?
Yeah, boy, it sure does look easy. It is a lot easier to read when it's on my computer screen, that's for sure. But yeah, it starts down here. Covers the red is US 36. So that's a United States highway, and therefore it's under the jurisdiction of the Indiana Department of Transportation. As we go north, it stays yellow until you get right around the curve. And at this location, it transitions to Hendricks County. North of the curve, it transitions for a short amount of time into the town of Avon, back to Hendricks County, back to Avon for a short stretch, and then finally about here all the way through the roundabout at Hendricks County.
I think to make a point, that blue line before the curve is going north is before you get to Prairie Trail.
Right down there.
Right there is,
Yeah. Starts right about there, I
right,
believe.
and right above that.
So this is Prairie Trail.
Prairie Trail.
It's right in the
Which is
middle.
in the county.
Right. All that road is under the responsibility of the Hendricks County Highway Department.
So this falls under in one of those Swiss cheese pockets of Washington Township that is under Hendricks County jurisdiction?
Right, right. And the annexations that were done out here, when a town annexes, we take all the right of way, from right of way to right of way. So usually if you've seen blue on there, that means it's in the county on both sides. The state law was changed a while back. It's been decades, I believe, that the town didn't necessarily take annexation. So I'm sure there's some areas of the town where even if we annexed it, we didn't take the right of way. But right now, if we annex property, we take the right of way into our inventory. But so these blue areas are likely areas where the town's jurisdiction, where the county has jurisdiction on both sides of the road.
But we don't have jurisdiction on that section of the road. We
Right,
have
it's not
jurisdiction
a-
of the properties on either side of the road, but not the road itself.
Yeah, it's not ours to maintain. And while In many cases like this, towns and counties will enter into interlocal agreements. It's not uncommon for you even to see silly things like snowplows being raised. Believe me, the county and the town know where their jurisdictions are. So you'll see silly things like snowplows being raised by county trucks and town trucks in areas where our jurisdiction ends. In most cases, what we do is enter into a local agreement and start trading territories, you know. But it doesn't always happen.
Okay. That was very informational. Thank you.
Yep.
Not really necessarily related to this, but very informational.
Well, I think the Plan Commission wanted to see this. At the last meeting, they said they
Sure.
wanted to see that. We were able to review a lot of the things. The only thing I think we did not get to you was the Public Works Director. You wanted the Public Works Director to attend. Unfortunately, he was on his vacation, and that's why the town manager came.
Bill, on the emergency access, would that need to also be a commitment?
Well, it doesn't necessarily need to be a commitment because it's a requirement of the ordinance. And so they're going to have to request a waiver of that ordinance requirement when it comes to you for platting. So they,
Well, I mean, so I'm looking at that, having an agreement in place on the maintenance of the emergency access. So does the requirement then include that they will have to put an agreement on who's going to maintain that emergency access, like for snow removal?
well, yeah, that would be something that would be reviewed in the Declaration of Covenants for the neighborhood when it comes in for subdivision platting.
Okay,
I mean, currently, we show you, so what we show you is their plan to accommodate a second means of ingress and egress into the site for emergency access. They still have to request a waiver during platting of that standard.
Okay.
And you still get the opportunity to review that at the time of platting, should the town council approve this rezoning request.
And that's in a similar place to when we had a prior petition for this land. Excuse me, and we had lengthy conversations about a second egress that was emergency only, that had a gate on it and that sort. And this is in a similar placement.
Yeah, that was the initial rezoning when they were looking to do, I think, 104 or 110 lots on that property.
Mhm.
There was a lot of discussion about emergency ingress and egress into the site through the Costco lot at that time. Now, when it came through platting, there was no need. The threshold is 49 lots. The proposal was 34 lots, so there was no need for a second means of ingress and egress when it was platted for 34 lots.
But this one is 80, so.
This is 80, and so when it comes to you with platting, they're going to file a waiver of that standard, of the subdivision control ordinance standard. And then you'll have the opportunity to review the ingress and egress and get the testimony of the fire department and the public works director to ensure that it's consistent with their desires. The fire department has conditions of approval, I think, that have like 3 or 4 conditions on it, including the weight that it's designed to handle, because they've got to put a ladder truck over that thing, and then using Knox box type of access points on it so that they have an emergency key that they can use. But it's going to be gated. But the details of that, we'd get into at platting.
But do we see this, it's a little hard to tell on this particular drawing that we have. Is that what we're seeing there, just on the east side of the pond? Looks like a retention pond.
Yeah, it's on the east side of the retention pond, or the proposed location, obviously, is on the east side of the retention pond, heading south into Costco.
So this is built into the plan already, that there would be an emergency second egress.
Right, the conceptual plan shows the access point, because the petitioner knew that would be a point that the Plan Commission would want to know. So oh yeah, that's horrible. Yeah, I apologize for that. I didn't notice that copied so poorly. But you're right. Yeah, that they wanted to make sure that you knew that they had accommodated a second means of ingress and egress for emergency access, because that became such an important part of the last hearing on this petition.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? If there's no further questions for staff, we ask the petitioner step forward.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the commission. My name is John Moore. My address is 50 South Meridian Street, Suite 700, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46204. I'm here tonight on behalf of Lennar Homes. With me in the crowd, I have Ty Reinhardt, Keith Lash, and Taylor Navarre of Lennar Homes. And we also have Matt Brown with us of A&F Engineering. And I know that all but Ms. Ransberg heard this last month, so for your benefit, I will go through this again and hit the highlights of our proposal here. This is a request to rezone approximately 11 acres near County Road 900E and East Prairie Trail, just north of the petition you heard previous to this. Like I said, the site, it's, as we discussed last month, it's a unique site in that it's L-shaped. It's got a very narrow access onto 900 here, L-shaped, comes back, and then comes up to the Prairie Trail subdivision here. So it's unique. It's an infill site. It's currently unimproved. It's got improvement all around it. You've heard various petitions on this property over the past several years. It's an infill site in need of development. And we suggest to you that this townhome development is the proper development and transition from the Costco to the single-family residential to the north. The property is currently zoned R2. Our proposal is for 80 townhomes, or up to 80, a maximum of 80. Townhomes are not permitted in the R2 zoning classification. They're permitted in the R3 and they're permitted in the R4. R3 allows 4 units per acre and R4 allows 10 units per acre. We're right over 7 units per acre on this proposal for the max number of townhomes. So it's not to R4, it's more like R3 plus in there between the R3 and the R4. It does not reach the R4 density. Here's the proposal. It differs just a little in what you have in your staff report. And the reason for that is that originally this was a 25 or 30 foot buffer. After meeting with some folks, it's been increased to 50 feet. And as Mr. Peoples pointed out, there is a commitment there that we're going to maintain that existing tree line there between this development and the single-family residential to the north. Some other differences from our prior proposal. Last year, the plan came in, there was at 110, then it went to 109 units. That's now currently at 80 townhomes in the development. Right here, townhomes were eliminated. Instead, this will be created to be a park area that we'll see here shortly. There was also some parking nodes that have been added in the development to reduce that number of units from 109 to 80. As discussed, we've added this 50-foot landscape buffer or tree easement here to the north. This will be maintained. Here's looking from the YMCA to the north. The homes at Prairie Trail are behind that tree line, which you cannot see. They're very nicely screened by the existing tree line there. We'll maintain that. As indicated, the only caveat is if there is a require to remove any trees for the installation of utilities. We don't think there will be, but sometimes that comes up. And if it does, we would replace those 2 for 1 for any tree removed, subject to staff approval as to those trees that would be.
Quick question for you.
Yes, sir.
The existing tree line, is that on Lennar's property or is that on Prairie Trail property?
I believe
you're
it's,
talking
I believe it's both, but yeah, I think it sort of runs the property line there down the middle. We'd have to get Beacon or a survey out, but I think it's on both sides of it. Yes. Oh, shoot. As for the townhomes that we're proposing, we have townhomes of 2 to 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. They'll average between 1,700 and 1,800 square feet, and they'll be priced in the low to mid 300s. Staff has agreed to, or Lennar has agreed to staff's request that the townhomes comply with the architectural standards of the single-family detached dwellings in the UDO. The exterior of these townhomes will be maintenance-free. They will be maintained by the homeowners association. There will be no short-term or VRBO leases in the development. Leases must be at least 30 days. And we would anticipate starting construction in 2024 and seeing owners late 2024, early 2025. Here's another typical rendering of what we'd expect to see as the townhomes. The townhomes vary between runs of 4 units, 5 units, 6 units. This is an example of a 4-unit townhome run in the development. So we indicated we have a common park area in the middle. We're also going to have a path, asphalt path that's going to run along 900, the frontage of 900, then run through the development and connect into the existing path at the YMCA to provide for that recreational amenity there for the development. Talked a little bit about the access. This site, as stated, is a unique site in that it has that narrow frontage there on 900E. So what we're proposing is a boulevard entrance out on 900E, and then the proposed emergency access drive down through the Costco parking lot as part of the development. At the last hearing, Mr. Zuzan requested an update on where we were on the writing or the documents with Costco as to that. So I've handed out, it's the handout behind the presentation. The most recent communication, I can tell you that the documents have been drafted and exchanged between Lennar and Costco. Costco is reviewing the plans and documents. They've agreed to cooperate with Lennar regarding our request for an emergency access easement. Things are being worked out right now about cost sharing and so forth for that easement area for the emergency access. Again, as Mr. Peoples pointed out, that will be subject to approval at the plating stage. We'll have to have that when we come in and ask for that waiver of that emergency access. And at that point, obviously, the agreement will have to be complete and be reviewed. Yes, sir.
Mr. Taylor, would you want to see this agreement?
I think staff, we want to see it, yes.
Okay.
We usually do review.
Okay.
And we'll certainly provide a copy as we move forward in the development. In the staff report, the staff points out that with respect to the access the petitioners proposed, single boulevard access at County Road 900E, along with emergency access drive to be installed at the south end of the property. This emergency access is proposed to be connected to Costco Harvest Landing Parking Lot Drive. This compromise was reached by the petitioner after conferring with the Avon Fire Department. The Avon Fire Department found the emergency access to be sufficient, subject to 4 conditions. Proper signage would be required. Drive must be at least 20 feet wide and able to support 80,000 pounds. Gate required to have a Knox pad on it to allow for emergency access. And there would need to be an agreement on who is responsible for and how the emergency access drive would be maintained. Lennar has agreed to all 4 of those requirements. We talked a little about the comp plan during the last hearing and how the comp plan for this area currently, it was adopted in 2017. And you can see where the Costco is right here. Our site's up here, and it's sort of between area retail and specialty housing. And as we discussed last month, when Costco got developed and then the development you just approved tonight for Harvest, the last section of Harvest Landing, it really squeezes this property here and limits its use as a retail site. And as I think a staff would say, it's better to have more specialty housing in between here, the townhome use, to provide a transition from this heavy commercial here to the south to the single family residential to the north. We're going to talk about traffic here in a minute. We did have a traffic analysis done. And I'll point it out then, but I also want to point out now, when you look at the comp plan, when we look at the AM peak hour and the PM peak hour for traffic, if this were developed with retail, in the morning, it's going to be more than 2 times the traffic that'll be generated by the 80 townhome development. And in the evening, it would be more than 5 times the traffic that'll be developed by our 80 townhome development. So if traffic is the concern that it is, retail would exacerbate that significantly. Whereas, as you'll see in our numbers and as staff pointed out, the 80 townhome has a minimal impact on traffic. Excerpts from the staff report on the statutory findings. Number 1, comprehensive plan is adopted and amended from time to time. Staff finds that a higher density residential use may serve as a more effective and preferable land use buffer between the high intensity commercial uses to the south and the lower intensity estate homes to the north. Criterion 2, current conditions and the character of the current structures and uses in each district. Staff points out properties to the south are overwhelmingly commercial in nature, whereas the properties to the north and east are predominantly residential. Single-family attached residences could serve as an effective transitional use between the two contrasting uses and districts. Criterion 3, the most desirable use for which the land in each zoning district is adapted. Staff finds the proposed use for the subject site to be favorable and desirable when considering the location and configuration of the property. Criterion 4, the conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction. Staff believes this proposal would serve as a more preferable use of abutting Prairie Manor subdivision to the north than the area retail land use designated within the future land use cluster map, and would serve to conserve property values of nearby properties and throughout the jurisdiction. And Criterion 5, responsible development and growth. This request would develop a historically vacant infill lot with an effective transitional use. It is consistent with the specialty housing designation located immediately north of the subject site. And with that, you saw during Mr. Peoples' presentation, staff recommends that the Plan Commission forward a favorable recommendation to the Town Council, subject to the following commitments. The dwellings, apartment buildings, small, and dwellings, apartment building, large, shall be prohibited. Required architectural standards shall be that of single-family detached dwellings as required by the UDO, and an 8-foot asphalt trail shall be constructed through the development, connecting the trail along County Road 900 East with the trail system within the Satari Point PUD. And Lennar has agreed to all 3 of those commitments. As indicated, we did have a traffic operation analysis done for the proposed development that was conducted by A&F Engineering. As I said, Matt Brown is here to answer any questions if you had them about the analysis. But what it shows, and what this slide shows out of the analysis, is the AM and PM peak time traffic generated by this development. You'll see that in the AM headed south, you have 16 cars per peak hour. Headed north, you have 11 cars per peak hour. In the PM, 11 cars headed south, 7 headed north out of the subdivision. Coming into the subdivision in the PM, you'd have 16 headed north, 5 during the AM. And then headed south on 900 into the subdivision. In the AM, you would have 4 cars per peak hour and 10 cars per peak hour of the PM, 4 in the AM. So what does that mean? As pointed out by A&F Engineering, the proposed development will have a minimal traffic impact on County Road 900E due to the small amount of peak hour traffic generated by the site. The traffic study that was previously done projected traffic volumes in 2028. And those volumes are here in the AM, the PM, the AM, and the PM. Our development, AM, between the proposed development and Angelina Way, 21 per peak hour in the AM, 27 per peak hour in the PM. That's 3.42% of the overall traffic, 2.22 in the PM of the overall traffic. Between Angelina Way and US 36, we'd have 21 during AM peak hour, 27 in PM peak hour. Drops further on the percentage, 3.34% in the AM, 2.41 in the PM. And as I indicated before, if we were to look at this site being developed with a commercial use, and on this site, let's say you have a 50,000 square foot commercial building on an 11-acre site, you're looking at more than 2 times that number in the AM, you'd have 52, and more than 5 times in the PM as 156, we would project per peak hour. So this townhome use has very minimal traffic impact on County Road 900E. The conclusions in the A&F engineering report say the capacity analysis have shown that all approaches to this intersection will operate at acceptable levels of service during the AM and PM peak hours with the following recommended intersection conditions. 1, construction of the eastbound full access drive with 1 inbound and 1 outbound lane. That's the access drive in and out of the development. And we will have a boulevard entrance. So you'll have 1 eastbound and 1 westbound lane in that boulevard entrance. 2, construction of an exclusive northbound left turn lane along County Road 900E. We will accommodate that. What that will do is headed north, turning left into the subdivision, you will have an exclusive left turn lane. They're turning into the subdivision. So the traffic heading north will continue to go on the right. You have a turn lane down the middle, and then heading south, they'll get shifted over into the right of way that we're going to grant to the town of Avon as part of this development to accommodate for that exclusive northbound left turn lane. And then lastly, the intersection should be stop controlled. Obviously, there will be a stop sign there at the entrance to the development for that traffic that's exiting the development. There will be a stop sign there for it heading north or south. In the staff comments, the department and Department of Public Works concurs with the conclusions of the A&F engineering analysis. The staff says in summary, there will be some delays in leaving the subdivision during the morning and evening peak hours, but the development itself will not degrade the level of service along County Road 900 East during those times. Again, minimal traffic impact and acceptable levels of service for this development. I put together a slide, and Mr. Peoples pointed out some of the commitments we talked about at the last meeting. I think I had a few more here that we talked about that whether we reduce those to commitments or not, as sort of as the staff would like us to do that. 1, the exterior of the townhomes will be maintained by the HOA. They're maintenance free on the exterior. Any lease of a townhome shall be for a minimum of 30 days. The northern property line between the development and Prairie Manor shall include a 50-foot landscape buffer. The developer will maintain the existing tree line between the development and Prairie Manor, with the exception of trees that are required to be removed for utility easements. Any trees between the development and Prairie Manor removed for utility easements will be replaced 2 for 1 with staff approval. The townhomes will meet the architectural standards of single-family detached dwellings per the Avon UDO. The developer will complete the improvements as required by the traffic operation analysis prepared by A&F Engineering, and the restrictive covenants will prohibit parking on the streets in the development. So in summary, we have an approximately 11-acre infill site. This site has been before you many times. It needs to be developed. We are proposing an 80 townhome development, which is reduced from 109 townhomes. It's an appropriate transitional use for an infill site. It will meet the architectural standards of single-family detached dwellings per the Avon UDO. 2 to 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, and approximately 1,700 to 1,800 square feet. Estimated price low to the mid 300,000s. Petitioner agrees to planning staff's requested commitments, and planning staff recommends a favorable recommendation. And with that, we respectfully request a favorable recommendation to the town council, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
I do have a question, and I'm going to follow up with a question to Mr. Taylor. So is this a community that is being designed with the intention of there being rental units, being promoted as rental units?
No, it's owner. It'll be
Owner
promoted as
occupied.
owner occupied.
And Mr. Taylor, could you remind everybody present what the law says with regards to how a commission like this can move forward or not with relating to rental properties?
You can't regulate leasing a property for the most part. The covenant is nice because it limits the copies of these.
Right.
You really can't regulate.
Okay, thank you.
So if the petitioner has said that they would commit to a lease of a townhome shall be for a minimum of 30 days, is that something that can be held to or not?
Yes, it's an offer, voluntary.
Yeah,
commitment
it's
on
voluntary.
part of Yes, we can accept that. We can make that commitment part of our.
And that's kind of the way to kind of deter the
Airbnb.
VRBO, Airbnb type of thing, is to say,
Party
if
houses
you are going to
type.
rent it out, it's got to be for 30 days at least, so it's a little bit of a deterrent.
Can you expand?
We can just accept the commitment.
Yes.
It might be better just to say it that way.
And we'll incorporate that into our covenants, conditions, and restrictions in the community. That'll be recorded as part of the development.
Can you expand that commitment to include that none of these would be rented?
I don't believe we have the authority to request that. Is that correct? We cannot require it.
Well, I'm just asking if you wanted to add that to his commitment.
Here's the challenge, and I'll turn to the client, but a complete ban on rentals, one, you may have someone who gets assigned a job in some other location and they want to rent their unit. And they would have to be required to do that for more than 30 days to rent that. You may have someone like me. I'm currently renting because I've sold a home and I've got another home under renovation. And so my wife and I are renting for 6 months. And so a whole limitation on rentals, I don't think is necessarily what we're looking to do. Or the intention here is these are the owner occupied, but circumstances arise where folks do either lease out their units or someone who is working at Hendricks Regional next door might be there for 6 months or a year and needs a place to rent. So we would like to provide that option to them.
Follow up then, I guess I don't understand the commitment about the 30-day leases then. Who's doing the leasing? Is the rental on Lennar, or do you don't want the rental ban on any owner occupied? Can you help me understand that, please?
That's primarily for VRBO, Airbnb. You've got the Big Ten Championship coming in this week to Indianapolis. You'll have a lot of Iowa fans coming in, and someone may want to rent a unit for a weekend as a party place for the Big Ten Championship. This would prohibit that. It would prohibit the issue we saw in a northern suburb of Indianapolis within the last 6 months, where it was a former Colts player or Pacers player, I can't remember, it was a former athlete, had a home that was being used for weekend parties.
I guess
Being
it
rented
may be
out.
the terms rental lease. Are you saying that no rental lease period less has to be greater? It needs to be greater than 30 days?
Yes, sir.
So
Rent
if I
lease, same-
rent it
I'm using those
for
terms interchangeably.
6 months, is that, so again, I'm confused, lease versus renting, same thing?
I use those terms to mean the same thing.
Okay,
Those-
Can't
yeah,
be
those
leased,
would
can't
the
be
same
rented.
thing.
that's why it's synonymous, okay.
Any further questions for the petitioner with regards to this proposed development?
You're not suggesting we discriminate against an Iowa fan,
No, but we would more welcome Wisconsin folks.
But you don't have to worry about them coming to the Big Ten championship.
Other than issues of Big Ten loyalty, are there any other questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any persons who would like to make public comment on this? And just as a reminder, I know the petitioner ran right up against his 10 minutes. We do have a 10-minute.
We have Chris Williams. Next is Tim Pettigrew.
Did Chris Williams leave? Maybe? Okay, go ahead.
We've coordinated our comments time, so I might be a little longer than the next one, but it will be under our 10 minutes.
Thank you.
What I'd like to talk about, one is the tree line. Those trees are mostly honeysuckles. They lose their leaves winter time. They do not do anything to protect during the winter and fall. So that needs to be looked at. Moving the park from the center between the complex, the park is great, but you can move that to the north and also use that as the buffer. So also last meeting, it was discussed a 30-foot roadway, because currently Camden Inns was 20 feet and cars were everywhere. So what I'd also like to talk about is criterion 5, responsible growth and development. You heard the comments about the Lennar traffic's operation analysis. The ANF engineers use projections from Crossroads Engineer for the 2028 traffic volumes. Projections are best guess estimates. ANF also estimated the number of peak hour trips proposed townhome development. Estimates are not real world data, but they are estimates. So one of the comments that I do not believe, but do you believe with 80 townhomes that are paying approximately $2,000 a month will add 21 cars in the morning and 27 cars in the evening to the peak traffic on 900? I don't think so. ANF combined the two projections and estimates to determine traffic volumes for 2028. That's 5 years down the road. So residents of Avon chose another approach for a traffic study. First, we surveyed the residents along 900 East. 85 signed a petition saying that there was a traffic issue on 900. Secondly, we had a true real-time actual data traffic survey conducted. So it started Tuesday, November 14th, and it went through Saturday, November 18th. So we had Wednesday, Thursday, Friday as full days. There were 28,002 cars were analyzed traveling on 900 East. Population of Avon for 2023 is a little over 25,000. We've got about 1/3 of the population of Avon travels on 900 each day, 900 East each day. The actual number of cars traveling on 900 East, 7,119 cars per day. That's, again, about 1/3 the population of Avon. When looking at the data collected, speed is also a major issue. 900 East has a posted speed of 30 miles an hour. Out of the 28,002 records of cars traveling on 900 East, 21,280 were traveling between 31 and 40 miles an hour. 4,300 were traveling between 41 and 50 miles an hour. 41 were traveling between 51 and 60. And there was one vehicle that actually traveled at 69 miles an hour. So speed is definitely a problem. Concerning the AM and PM peak volumes, peak volume in the morning and evenings, the maximum number of cars traveling in 1 hour. Our data indicates peak volume changes depend on which day you look at. AM peak is 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock noon. PM peak is 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Again, depends on what day you look at. Heavy traffic is a belt. It's not just that one point in time, that 1 hour. You've got hours on each side of that the heavy traffic is there. When looking at the PM or the AM peak traffic volume, if you add the actual data collected and the estimated Lennar townhome numbers, Avon is already at the 2028 traffic volume projections. We're there. This is the same calculation A&F Engineering used in their traffic study, page 11, table 5. You got to see that. It was posted. However, their conclusion states minimal effect to traffic in 2028. Well, we've got 85 residents that are saying it's a problem right now. The actual data collected and calculations does not include Harvest Landing, Lot 2 Ace Hardware, Lot 4 BB Bop or Satori Point Shops. With the implementation of these projects, the traffic issues will only get worse. In conclusion, we have a traffic safety issue on 900 East currently, and we have the data to support it. The Lennar Village Place Townhomes 2 project should be stopped. We are against this project. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Ron Fraser. Ron Fraser.
Thank you. Ron Fraser, 8806 Pro Trail, Avon. Are we able to bring back up the presentation that I can talk to some of the points he had on that presentation at all, or do I just need to talk?
The petitioner's presentation?
Yes, sorry, the petitioner's presentation at all? Is that possible?
Mhm.
Just so I can point to particular things on that? Or do you want the remote?
Yeah. That there.
Okay, thank you. Are we able to go back to the beginning, please? Okay, so if we could just move through the first, I think, yeah, so with the site proposal, they were mentioning that they're going to put a lane in the middle for turning into that particular property. So from our property looking right, so when we're trying to get out, as it is, we have a real issue with traffic going both ways and around that corner. But if we're now going to have an extra lane in the middle, it's going to be harder for us to see the traffic coming from the right, trying to get out of our property. So from where we are trying to get out, if we're looking down to the south, and there is now a middle lane of traffic sitting there trying to get into that property, it's going to be more difficult for us to see what's coming through behind it, and they're traveling at a speed faster than 30 miles an hour. So that is going to be a safety issue for us. I'd just like to mention. If we can move to the next slide, please. All right. The photo that was shown earlier on of the tree line was shown not directly on. It was from the left-hand side in the the YMCA property. So it actually looks thicker than it really is. Okay, so when you've got a side view like that, what you're seeing, that tree line there, it's not as thick as what it looked like in that picture. I just wanted to mention that, please. And as also, all those trees do lose their leaves. A lot of those trees are in the property of the people in Prairie Trail as well. Digging those in, there is some large trees in there, and I'm hoping that we won't lose those trees when they dig trench through, because whatever trees are replaced won't be of the size and nature of the trees existing that are there. Also, the photo shown was of a four unit, but if you notice, most of those are 6 units. I would like to have seen what a 6 unit looked like. If we could just move on to, oh, sorry. Yep. Okay. You're right. Talking about the density. So to the north and to the east of that property, our houses to the north, that property, that actual area there is a 564% increase in density compared to our properties. 564% increase in density. I don't see how that enhances our area at all, or even lends towards it compared to the Costco. To the east, it's a 462% density increase. So there's not in my opinion, there's not a proportion there between the properties to the north and the east and that particular property. It's the density is too much. Could we go to the next, please? Keep going. Thank you. Go. Yeah. All right. There. That was the. Okay. There's the 4. Sorry. I apologize. Keep going. Next. 6. Slide 7. Let's see. I want to get to the criteria, please. Okay. So, criterion 2. I don't believe. I do believe it will devalue the properties to the north of this proposed development. The density increase is way too much. The original proposal that was agreed to was, I think, 34 houses. This is 80 units. It's a much more dense development than what we suggested earlier. That's why with criterion 3, the most desirable use of this land would be the approval, the suggestion that's already been approved of the actual houses that were going to go in there originally. I think about a year or so ago, that agreement had gone through, and for some reason it fell away. So this is definitely not a desired option for this property. Regarding the 80 units, what I've noticed is that most houses or units have 2 or 3 cars per residence. So in 80 units, we're looking at anywhere from 160 to 240 cars trying to get out of that entrance and exit, which is going to put a squeeze on both us and Prairie Trail, as well as the other people on 900. And it was talked before about with the existing commercial properties having pipes going out into other areas to alleviate the issue there. In my opinion, what's happening is by putting that Ace Hardware exit in there, what we've done is we've pushed all that extra pressure out of the Costco and the commercial area onto 900. 900's no wider. So when you've got a pipe that doesn't get wider and you get more pressure, you just get a lot more traffic. You're not getting any alleviation on 900 at all. So in my opinion, this is definitely going to impact us on 900. It's going to be significant. Regarding the Lennar properties too, I thought at the last meeting it was discussed about having a 30-foot wide drive going through that property as well, because of the existing Lennar property that we have in Avon has cars parked all over the street and all over the footpath. And for those that were here at the last meeting, I think that you would remember the picture that was provided on the front of that particular option there that showed the cars parked on the footpaths. As I said, 2 to 3 cars per property. There's not a lot of room for those cars in that particular development. I do feel that, sorry, if we can go to criteria 4 and 5. Yeah, so I don't believe it meets criterion 4. I believe our property values are going to drop significantly because of the number of units in this small area. The density from 564 in our area, compared to areas 564% greater. There's no way that can keep our property values there. And responsible development growth, I just don't think that with the way 900 is right now and what Tim has talked about we have a third of the population of Avon on that road every day, currently. That's not including the Ace Hardware, that's not including this development. And I'm sorry, but I don't understand how only 27 vehicles during a peak hour would be leaving out of an area that has a minimum 160 cars trying to get out of there around those times. These people are all leaving for work. I know that in our estate, we have quite a few cars in those early mornings that are sitting there trying to get out. And we can wait there for 5 minutes or more to try to get out of our property because of the traffic coming each way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So we have a Brandon Wilson.
Brandon Wilson.
Yep.
That
And
may be later after a different piece, not on this topic.
Okay, is there anybody else who would like to speak on this particular agenda item? If not, public comments are closed, and we would ask the petitioner give them a 5-minute rebuttal.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. The main issue is what we've been dealing here with traffic. And that's what we hear. There's traffic concerns on 900A, and I certainly understand those. But as we've seen in the traffic analysis that was done, this development has minimal impact on the traffic. The intersection continues to operate at an acceptable level of service. And that is agreed to by not only A&F and engineering, but the staff and the public works director. I did want to bring up Matt Brown briefly to talk about how those numbers are determined for the peak hour traffic into the development. So he's better to answer that than I am.
Sure.
Good evening, Matt Brown with A&F Engineering, 8365 Keystone Crossing. Probably the biggest theme I heard through that I'll just quickly hit on is the estimate of traffic coming in and out of development, how that's done. Typically, any traffic engineer would use what's called the IT trip generation manual. And it's basically a database of multiple land uses, whether it be retail, residential, industrial, you name it. There's a bunch of land uses in this database. This database contains actual data. There have been traffic engineers that went out and counted 100 home subdivision, and they recorded it, how many cars came in and out. Another engineering firm might have done the same, and they all put this in this big database. So you have an average of multiple actual land uses where traffic has been counted in and out of. And that is the Bible for a traffic engineer to use to estimate traffic when you're dealing with future development. There are special circumstances, certainly. Townhomes is not one of them. There's a lot of data on townhomes. There's a lot of data in residential land uses. So if any engineer is going to look at it, that's going to be their starting point. So that's where that data comes from. It is actual data collected by professionals throughout the United States at similar land uses.
How often is that data updated?
It is updated. Probably it's not regularly, like it's not on a cycle, like a regular cycle. Typically, they will go back maybe every 3 to 4 or 5 years, and they'll do a review. For instance, the last review, which I was actually part of, they went and looked at, okay, a lot of these land uses, for instance, banking has changed a lot in the last 40 years, right? So there were data points in the database that were from like the 1970s. They were accurate, representing what banks do today and how people use banks. So those were purged. So now the database, I believe, now runs from 1980 on up. But they're always taking new data. If I want, unfortunately, it's volunteer. They don't pay you to collect this data. So they just rely on transportation professionals like ourselves to go get this data, send it into the Institute of Transportation Engineers. When they get enough data to update the set, then they will do so, because it's manuals about this thick.
So is there an error deviation in the calculation?
There is. There's a rate, there's usually a best fit equation, and then there's some standard deviations in there.
So so it looked like there was only a quarter of cars for the number of units being built. It looked like 20-ish. So it's like, how is that calculated? Is there a projection of like, are there 2 cars projected per unit, or is there a 1 point something cars per unit?
It varies.
So,
I mean, it just varies. The data is not that granular. I can't go in there and say how many of these data points did it have this many cars? How many? It just says, okay, the independent variable is the number of units. On average, what does that data set tell you that number of units would generate?
so do you plug in the number of units in the database and it tells you how many cars are coming out?
Correct. In and
How
out,
does it do that?
because it's based on averages. So the data set is plots.
Okay.
So you might have 20, 40, 80 plots of actual data. So at one site, it might have been 100 townhomes generated 50 vehicles. At another one, it might have been 80 generated 40. So it's just this, and then they have an average of all those data sets. And in some cases, they actually have a linear regression or a best fit curve that better represents that data.
How do they account for areas that have better mass transit and not as good?
Yeah, there is some, it depends on the land use, but there is some, over the last several years, they've taken the data and refined it to where you can filter it for close to rail transit, urban area, things like that. So for instance, a high-rise apartment building, there's a separate land use when compared to like a regular standard apartment like you might see around here, because typically the high-rise apartments are in urban areas that are going to have more walking. Therefore, the vehicle in and outs are going to be a lot lower.
And what are the definitions for the peak time?
It's defined as a time period between 6 and 9 a.m. and between 4 and 7 p.m. Or in some cases, it's 3 to 6, honestly.
Is there also a distinction made between single-family homes with 3 to 4 bedrooms versus the townhome? Single-family homes might be people with children who are expected to be chauffeuring their kids to 14 different places at one time versus a townhome that might be empty nesters.
There's a whole separate land use for single family. And then there's this whole separate land use for apartments. There's a whole separate land use for townhomes. There's senior living. There's a separate land use. So yeah. So in general, like a single family home is roughly 10 trips a day. A development like this, it would be like 6 trips a day. So it's about 60, a townhome is about 60% of a single family when you look at the averages, somewhere around there.
Any further questions?
Were there a lot of, you said the data is not updated that often. I'm kind of wondering, during COVID, a lot more people started working from home, and that's starting to adjust back, but it largely hasn't. Could that account for the?
No, they would not take COVID data.
Okay, I just.
Yeah, no, they would.
Well, I'm hearing that the numbers to a lot of people are low.
Yeah.
I didn't know if COVID.
No.
I figured that's probably going to be considered a blip until it shows
Yeah,
it's a more long-lived
correct.
phenomenon.
They won't take the COVID data and put it in the database just because it was so far down, as you know. So no, that wasn't included.
Thank you. That was very.
One question. Do you have any thoughts? You heard their comments and their data and their statistics and how they came up with it. Do you have any comments regarding that?
Yeah, I trust the data because I've seen the data, I've worked in the data, and not only that, as a side note, A&F Engineering in certain times where we haven't been busy, we will go and do counts at land uses that feed into that database. And very rarely do I get a land use that is substantially different than the average I was getting out of that data set.
So you would not be surprised if one of your employees were to go to a similar property and find similar numbers to what you're proposing now?
Based on everything I've seen on the data we've collected in the past, I don't know, probably 20 years I've done sites here and there, it's very consistent with what IT data says. And just as a side note, I happen to live in a townhome. I can tell you the traffic in and out of my townhome development is far less than a single family residential, just based on me coming in and out. A lot of people are either retired or close to retirement in my townhome community. There's not a lot of kids running around my townhome community. I think maybe on my street, there might be 10 and 15 townhomes. I think I have the only kids, I think. So yeah, and a lot of people work off peak too. Some people don't necessarily all just barrel out of their house at the same time period in the morning and all return. Yeah, well, I mean, even myself, I get to the office before 7 o'clock. So I'm not in the peak hour traffic. I get home at 4:30. I mean, I get basically home. So I'm not even really in that peak. So there's a lot of people that do that. It doesn't even have to be shift. It just, they just go to work earlier and come home earlier. So, and some go in later. We have people that come in our office at 9:30. They miss that. They miss the peak. They're just on the other side of it. Anything else?
Thank you. Did you need to do any more rebuttal?
Just real briefly, I was going to touch on the density comment. I thought that was the other comment that was made. And I was just going to point out, this density, as I call it, it's R3 plus, basically 7 units per acre between the 4 of the R3 and the 10 of the R4. Staff believes that's appropriate for a transitional use between the heavy commercial and the residential to the north. I understand the desire for the single-family home that was mentioned. This site's been zoned like this for a long time. You've seen a lot of petitions on this site, and you saw one for single-family, and it failed. It didn't work. And I would suggest to you that the more appropriate use for this is the townhome use to be the transition between Costco and the residential to the north. So with that, happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
I have 2 quick questions. How deep are the driveways that you can park 2 vehicles, one behind each other, and still not be across the sidewalk?
Yeah, the townhomes are designed to fit 2 cars in the garage. The driveways are 20 feet deep, 2 cars in the driveway without blocking the sidewalk. And again, we will prohibit parking on the street.
And then the other question is, what is the width of the roads? Is it 30?
30 feet, and the town of Avon standard is 28.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Nope. Okay. Discussion. This, as he pointed out, this is what, the 3rd or 4th development plan that's been presented to us on this property. It's a uniquely situated property in that you have very nice, large, single-family home lots to the north and very commercial to the south. And pretty much anything in between would be considered transitional, I would think.
Just a couple of points on the roadway being 30 feet wide. And we've talked about this in other cases too, about 28, and is that wide enough? And I think we've talked about extensively, and the fire department weighs in, they say 28. I think 28 feet was sufficient for them to make sure they could travel down that if cars were parked on either side. So 30 feet exceeds what we've talked about in the past. I'm looking at you, Bill, and make sure I'm saying that correctly here, because I think we had discussions around 28 feet. Is that really wide enough or not?
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, the town historically, their philosophy is road diets and narrower street sections. I believe that our standard in the ordinance is 28. One of the standards in our ordinances are 28 feet. And in some cases, I think it even goes down to 24.
Yeah.
But you're right. There has been some back and forth between the town, the schools, and the fire departments, because the schools and the fire departments want wider roads because they use buses and fire trucks. And the town prefers a narrower road section because we've got to plow it and we've got to maintain it, and so it's that balancing act. But right, yeah, there's a standard in the ordinance for a 28-foot road section.
I just have a question. I know you're not law enforcement, but if cars parked on the sidewalk, I'm assuming that's illegal and.
It is. It's something code enforcement takes care of. If we find a problem. Now, vast majority of cases, it's transitory, some people, Thanksgiving people are there or something like that. But occasionally there are a few instances where we need to mobilize code enforcement to go out there and have people stop blocking sidewalks.
Okay. Thank you.
Did we have any feedback from anybody from the church?
No, we didn't. The church's concern has always been their sanitary sewer, because their sanitary sewer lateral goes through this property. I believe that the church has been talking with the petitioner or something, and they're going to accommodate the lateral, maybe relocate it. So the church's concern, as they've expressed it to us, has always been the location of their sanitary sewer lateral, because their sanitary sewer lateral, I believe, traverses the site and goes into Satori Point. And so that will be taken care of during subdivision design if this gets approved by the council.
There was a comment about going north, a left turn lane. What about a decel lane coming from the north going south?
XL decel lanes are standard requirements of our standards. So yeah, they will have to construct XL decel lanes. I believe that the access point is about 1/3 the distance from the southern property line. And so there is right of way associated with Harvest Landing, and there will be right of way for this development to do a decel lane and an XL lane into and out of this development.
Can you put that map back up there and show what you just explained? I think it might be the one where you showed.
So right here.
Well, earlier on too, where you showed what was in the town, what was in the county, what was in the state. Probably not in this right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't really blow it up, but.
Yeah, I mean, so it might be easier to look at something like that. So they will dedicate right away here. Now, the subdivision, the issue, of course, is this church was developed, I believe, in the county. So there's no right of way here. So they will be able to put in an axle lane to this site right down in here. And then there is right of way that's dedicated with the Harvest Landing commercial development. So they will be able to put an axle lane in there.
And as we talked last time, there really is no right of way
On this side.
acquisition on the east side of 900 because
Right.
of those residential homes.
Because these are all single-family dwellings that were constructed, I believe, in the 60s or 70s. And they're street frontage lots, meets and bounds lots. So the only right-of-way that exists here is prescriptive right-of-way, which is essentially, I think in Hendricks County, it's just pavement to pavement, or maybe it sometimes includes side ditches. But I don't know if there are any side ditches at that location, but a lot of times it's pavement to pavement.
So in summary, wherever we're going to get right of way for decel turn lanes, it's coming from the west side of 900.
Yeah, it'll be coming in over here.
Yes.
And that's been part of the issue, of course, is this is a collector. So I believe that's a 100-foot right of way. So the requirement is that they dedicate a 50-foot right of way. All that 50-foot right of way has been dedicated all the way around in here. This development here will dedicate a 50-foot right of way along County Road 900 here. And so, but we are talking prescriptive here, so we're going to have to put in a fairly short a left turn lane in the middle. And the reason we can get by with that is because it's a townhome development. You don't need a lot of stacking like you would down here for a commercial development.
Would that left turn lane be not only for this development, but also for the church property, which is right to the north of it then? Or not?
We wouldn't need to, no. The church has its own access point, and like I said, it was developed out in the county. There's no accel, decel lane in it for the church. The church probably doesn't generate enough traffic there to even require one, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further discussion? Comments?
And per the information that we got from some of the demonstrators, I think it demonstrates there is a traffic issue on 900 East. So I think that's separate from the zoning, is like that's a traffic issue there now with the number of cars the traffic study showed going out on 900 East. That's a fraction of the number of cars that travel on 900 East. So I think that's something I know we've talked about. Towns looked at that. Town's got to work with county. So, separate from this is like, hopefully that is something that will be considered here in the future. We got a lot of road issues around Avon as we grow.
It will. Again, we have to do it within the confines of the classification though as well, because we're not dealing with an arterial street here. So we're not going to build a lot of capacity in this street to encourage additional traffic on this street. We want to encourage traffic on the 100 North and the 100 South and the Dan Jones Road and the Avons Avenue. So those would be the ones where we would intentionally build maybe even excessive capacity into them to encourage traffic on this one. As a collector, it's just collecting the street, local street traffic along it. And it's also collecting some of the traffic from people who know. So people who know that that's a good street to drive on, like the planner here beside me when he's going home every night.
My last comment is this emergency access, this agreement that's being worked on currently between Costco. I always like the word reasonable. Hopefully it's reasonable for all parties. If there's a timeline on there, Dan, would we approve that? I mean, they say, yeah, you can use it for 10 years. And it goes away. Now we lose that second emergency access.
We usually want the easement to own the land and be perpetual. And so we usually look at it, and then again, as Bill mentioned earlier, if something changes, in this site, such that needs to be changed in the future, we like the onus to be on the landowner to come back and ask for a modification of that. I'm very sorry.
So as we do this, we're going to have input into that agreement.
Yeah, we're going to review it and make comments.
And we're going to have that agreement before any dirt is turned.
Yes, that would be required to be shown prior to permitting. So it might be shown to you sooner rather than later, but it could be a while and wait until they're ready to start that development. But it would be something that,
It's not something we would address today.
sorry,
It's not something we would address today because today is about zoning, correct?
right. But it wouldn't have to be presented before you had an approval or before the town council approved or disapproved or considered zoning. It's something that comes later, but we do look at them and we've done them Well, Greg, you know, I've been looking at those easements for a long time now. On some parking lots that don't exist anymore. So, but we look at them and try to make sure we're looking for magic things. Is it perpetual? Does it run with the land? Does it say what was represented in the meeting? Have all the parties agreed that need to agree? And is there anything in there that we didn't expect to see? So we'll take a look at that, and then it becomes a permitting issue.
And then my last comment is regarding a subdivision with 50 to 200 lots or dwelling units must have at least 2 street accesses onto appropriate perimeter streets. This is a private drive. Is there any distinction between public and private?
Yeah, they will need to file a waiver of that provision. So the Plan Commission would have to approve a waiver of that provision during the plating process. So when they file a primary plat on this development, they will have to file a waiver of that provision because they can't meet it. It's not, they can't put an access point on 2 private street or 2 public streets. And they can't separate the accesses by 1,200 feet if they're going to put it on the same public street. So they will need to request a waiver of that provision in order to develop the property.
Well, with that being said, it's imperative that we get the agreement with Costco.
Right. Yeah, it'll be part of the plat. We'll have it for the plating process. We'll probably have an executed copy of the easement, and we will review the declaration of covenants for long-term maintenance of that access drive through between the properties. That'll be part of the plat review process.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion, questions, comments from the members?
I have a question. I know if we send a favorable decision to council, that they can add more conditions. Can they omit any of our conditions?
I think to omit them, they would have to return it back to you. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
They can add commitments that make the approval more restrictive, if you want to think of it that way, without asking your permission, but they can't make it less restrictive than you all recommended. If they make it less restrictive, that has to come back here to you. It's a very good question.
Dave, you had one?
Yeah, when we make the proposal, how should we include the voluntary commitments that they've added?
Well, just forward it. I would just forward it with a favorable recommendation subject to those commitments. From an administrative standpoint, what happens is if the council let's say, for instance, taking yours, the council gets them and they only want 5 of the 6. So they delete 1. Then it gets bounced back to you all, and you all will then approve or deny that change. Let's say you deny it. Well, then it goes back to the council and they could then override your decision. But you at least get the opportunity to recommend to the council whether you think the council was right in deleting a commitment or not deleting a commitment. If they add commitments, they can add commitments as long as they make it more restrictive. When they take their final action, I prepare a commitment document. I forward it to Dan. Dan looks at it, makes sure it meets the legal standards that we need, and then I forward it to the petitioner, and the petitioner records that document and then gives us a copy of that recorded document back, and we leave it in a zoning file for reference. And then we review that as part of the plating process to make sure it complies with the commitments.
Okay, because in what we have, in your write-up, there were 6 commitments.
Right.
Additionally, there's 2 more that the petitioner is voluntarily committed to. That's exterior townhomes will be maintained by HOA, and any lease of a townhome shall be for a minimum of 30 days. I just want to make sure that we accept those commitments.
Yep.
In some way, so we just mention it.
Yeah, I mean, what you would do is you'd want to make sure you say that in the motion. What I do just so you know, is tomorrow or the next day, I will do a certification of the recommendation of the Plan Commission. And when I do my certification, I include the commitments that you forwarded. So there'll be a record of the commitments that you forward to the town council in my certification. So if you add the 2 additional ones, that would be in the certification that goes to the council. And then the council, each council member gets a copy of the certification, a proposed ordinance, and a copy of the staff report for their review before they actually schedule it for their decision.
So you could say, subject to the voluntary commitments made by the petitioner and the commitments requested by the town. And that would, which is what we have here, so.
And I'm not going to beat you to the record, to the motion, but on page 18 of their write-up, there's 3 bullet points that they've recommended. And on page 20, there's another whole page of commitments. If we're going to add commitments, I'd like to add page 20 and those 3 bullet points to the 3 that they already gave us and the 3 that the town's given us. And it's on the handout from the petitioner, David.
Yeah, I have that. That's
Okay.
where I had the 2 additional ones when I looked at their
Okay.
list. And they were missing one. They were missing the dwellings commitment. But that's fine because that was presented by staff. So I think if we say as presented by staff and as presented by the petitioner, I think it covers it. I don't know if there's any missed ones or not. Let me. Yeah,
There's 7 on here. Now, so the staff, I'll be honest with you, I sort of prefer the petitioner's covenant, but the commitment. There's a distinction between what the staff has put in their commitments, and that is that on-street parking will be prohibited. And what the petitioner has indicated in their commitments is restrictive covenants will prohibit parking on the street in the development. And selfishly, the reason that I prefer the petitioner's covenants is so that the town isn't the enforcement agent on that, the code enforcement inspector. Because if it's in the restrictive covenants, it's the homeowners association's responsibility to enforce the requirement. And if it's a commitment as drafted by staff, it would be the code enforcement inspector's responsibility to enforce that commitment.
isn't that better though? 'Cause-
Yeah, it is
because
better.
Indiana and HOA can't easily enforce.
Right, it is. I mean, I agree, it is better.
Ordinance enforcement could.
The only, and the reason that I prefer the latter, that one of them is, you're right, it's better if the code enforcement inspector, he has the power, the power of the state behind him. So that helps, but technically speaking, no parking zones are supposed to be an ordinance that are adopted by the council. And so we start getting into a slippery slope when we start having no parking zones created by a commitment on a rezoning rather than as an ordinance adopted by the council.
So if we said, subject to the commitments as presented that the petitioner has presented.
Yeah.
As well as the commitments requested by the town.
I don't have any objection to the way the staff drafted the commitment. The enforcement authority is a little bit different. And the code enforcement inspector would have to enforce it rather than the neighborhood association.
Well, the commitments page that was created doesn't say anything about exterior of townhomes shall be maintained
No,
by
you're
HOA
right.
or about the minimum rental of
Those
30
are the
days.
voluntary ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 2 that I think on there are exterior of the townhome maintained by the homeowners association and then the
30-day
duration of the
minimum.
lease.
Yeah. That
Those
are
2.
not on here, so.
We have no objection to either one of those commitments.
Okay.
And then the only other thing would be the acceptance of the Costco agreement in writing.
Right. It's a standard part of our processes to secure easements like that. When Lot 7 and Harvest Landing and the Bubba's 33. When Bubba's 33 needed additional parking, they secured an easement from Harvest Landing Lot 7, because Harvest Landing Lot 7 had an excess amount of parking. And that agreement has been recorded, and it's in the file for Harvest Landing Lot 7 and Bubba's 33 for the future. So yeah, those are common occurrences in administering these subdivisions, and so we would make sure we get that at the platting process.
I would like to make a comment that I really appreciate the detail to all the responses. We talked about this last month, and there was a lot of questions we had, and we asked for a traffic analysis. We asked for the details about who owns the roads and all that kind of thing. And I felt like the information provided tonight really tried to address everything we asked about last month. So I appreciate that.
We have wonderful staff. If there's no further discussion or conversation, does anybody want to make a motion? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I will try. I move that we forward ZA 2305, Village Place Townhome 2 zoning map amendment, a request for approval of zoning map amendments to rezone 11.2 acres from R2 to R4 to the town council with a favorable recommendation, subject to the commitments presented by the staff and the commitments agreed to by the petitioner.
I'll second.
Let's take a vote.
Catherine Rainford,
4.
Paul Gutenberg,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Andrew Spencer,
Against.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you all very much for your time tonight.
Moving on to the UDO text amendments.
Okay, we got ZA 2303 UDO text amendment dated November 2023. This is a request for approval of a UDO text amendment for various updates and corrections to the Town of Avon Unified Development Ordinance. These updates and corrections are a natural part of the life of a zoning ordinance or a unified development ordinance in our case. So the ordinance has been adopted for 1.5 years now. That's correct, if I do my math right. And in that time, we've identified certain aspects of our ordinance that we feel needs to be amended, whether to fix mistakes we made in the past, whether we realize that certain standards aren't being implemented correctly or aren't seeing the vision as we see it for our town and for the UDO. We've had an update once before, and that was our planning director, Bill, had added floodplain regulations as required by federal government. State government, okay. And that was back in June of last year. So I'm going to kind of go quickly here. I'm going to briefly outline the changes that were made in your ordinance. Hope you had some time to read them before this meeting. So I'm just going to briefly go over them. We added gasoline service stations as a classified use in our permitted use table. That was inadvertently left out of our ordinance, explicitly gasoline service stations out of our permitted use table. In the interim time, we had been using auto services light, I believe is the use classification. So we'd now like to have a specific use for gasoline service stations.
Was this more so for Ronald Reagan corridor?
This is just in general in our ordinance. Gasoline service stations was not defined or in the permitted use table.
Yeah, on the Ronald Reagan corridor, gasoline service stations are prohibited as the primary use, so you can't have a gas station along the Reagan corridor.
That's correct.
what we found by using the auto services light as a gasoline service station land use is that that particular provision has a note that limits the hours of operation when it's adjoining a residential district zone. And it's something like 7 to 10 or 7 to 9 or something like that, which is problematic. So we did create gasoline service stations as a standalone use. They're still prohibited along the Reagan corridor. But we changed that note. So I believe it's 5 to 11 is the hours of operation use for a gasoline service station that adjoins a residential use. So we widened the hours of operation for a gasoline service station because we realized, one, most people go and get gas in the early morning. And if it's 7 o'clock is early they can open, most people have already gone to work at that time. So we wanted to let those gas stations capture that morning traffic and capture some convenience traffic later in the evening for a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread or something like that.
That's great. In addition, we also added use limitations related to the outdoor storage. Say that it shall not exceed 20% of the gross floor area of the building, and it shall be immediately adjacent to the building there. Next, we added off-premise advertising signs as a classified use in the permitted use table. Like the gasoline service station, off-premise advertising signs were inadvertently left out of that permitted use table. They were defined in our ordinance, but they weren't included as a classified use. So we've permitted them by special exception in the I-2 and I-3 zoning districts. We've prohibited them in the Ronald Reagan corridor overlay, and they were already prohibited along the US 36 corridor.
So by adding them, it just further details out the ordinance since they're referenced throughout the ordinances. It's not like they couldn't be implemented or used since they're not defined as a permitted use. At some point, we'd have to correct this.
Yeah, it was an odd thing that we had standards in the ordinance for off-premise advertising signs, but we didn't have them enumerated as a permitted use anywhere. But we did have them enumerated as an excluded use in one of the overlay districts. So we really had a confusing thing trying to figure out what are we supposed to do with outdoor advertising uses.
It's about like having pet rules in an area that doesn't allow pets.
Exactly. So we thought we'd better include them in the table as a permitted use, and so we put them in the I-2, I-3 zoning districts. Those are the heavy and medium intensity zoning districts. And we also included them as a unit use by special exception. So they're prohibited in every other zoning district. They're prohibited in every overlay district. I think they may be permitted in tier 3 of the 36.
I don't think so.
Maybe not. I don't know. I know they're prohibited in tier 1s and tier 2s. I'm not sure if they're prohibited in or allowed in tier 3, but no one's going to want to build one in tier 3 of the overlay anyway, because it's right down there next to the railroad station, railroad tracks. In any case, we just clarified where they're permitted, how they're permitted, so they match the standards of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have front yard fences in US 36. We had several variance requests for front yard fences in the US 36 overlay zoning district, specifically in tier 3. The Board of Zoning Appeals saw various storage lots related to the dealerships on 36. And we assessed that standard, and we feel that it would be okay to allow front yard fences in tier 3 of the US 36 overlay. Just keep in mind that front yard fences for commercial properties are prohibited. So this would only really apply to industrially zoned properties. It would be allowed to have front yard fences in tier 3, of course.
So was it determined that more likely than not, any variance asking for that would have been approved? And so why not just allow it? Is that kind of the reasoning?
One of the advantages of a Board of Zoning Appeals, and one of the things that a Board of Zoning Appeals is good for, is a test of your ordinance. So if you find your Board of Zoning Appeals approving the same variance over and over and over again, it's better just to make it legal rather than force the Board of Zoning Appeals to hear that variance over and over again. And what we found in this particular instance is in Tier 3 of the US 36 overlay that the Board of Zoning Appeals nearly always approved a fence in the front yard. So we might as well just make it legal and avoid that administrative step of going to the BZA to get it.
And I applaud you for that, because if we're going to provide them the variance, then change it. So thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate the explanation.
Next up, we added some various accessory uses as permitted to residential uses, specifically in the AG zoning district. Inadvertently, again, I'd say garages and carports, home childcare, and home occupations. They were permitted in all other residential districts, but not in the AG zoning district. And the AG zoning district does permit single-family residential uses. So we have added these as permitted in AG as well, since it aligns with that residential use. Amended fence setback requirements from buried stormwater pipes. The ordinance states that fences must be placed 5 feet away from any buried stormwater pipe or stormwater conveyance. We have amended that to just be publicly maintained stormwater conveyances. That's because we don't want to prohibit a large industrial site from being able to construct fences within their own site with their own privately maintained stormwater drainage conveyances. I hope that made sense. We added institutional uses to.
I have a question. Mr. Taylor, you're fine with that?
Yeah.
Because we've had some issues in the past with some homeowners.
Yeah, and it's an unusual issue, but almost every time we've had these issues, the setback requirements really don't make sense. And I think the key word here is publicly maintained. So we have conflicts sometimes, and that's why I like this idea, because it has to happen. It's not private though. This is publicly maintained stormwater, which is a whole different thing. That the thing you can encounter a lot of things under the ground. This is just publicly maintained. So,
Thank you.
I like all of their suggestions. I do. I don't always, but I do. They make sense and they're logical also.
We added institutional uses to the commercial and industrial landscape buffer standards. Our ordinance has landscape buffer standards, as you know, that would buffer residential uses to more intense uses. We did not have a buffer for institutional uses, so we included them with the commercial and industrial. However, we did add an allowance for a reduced buffer if the petitioner can prove to staff that there won't be a negative effect on the adjacent residential district there. Because institutional uses are typically low intensity, it depends on it, and we would assess it on a case-by-case basis. But typically, churches aren't emitting a lot of light or emitting a lot of noise or the sorts of things that a landscape buffer would shield a neighborhood from. So.
Yeah, the vast majority of institutional uses that get constructed in the town are either public schools or churches. And in those instances, you usually have a significant amount of green space around the institutional uses. So we allowed this allowance to reduce a buffer in the event that the institutional use is a school or a church with a significant amount of green space. Now, if we're talking about a hospital or we're talking about a jail or something like that, then we would more strictly apply the commercial buffer standards for something like that. But if we're talking about a school or a church with lots of green space around it, it makes sense not to have them put in a long line of evergreen trees around their property line if they're 400 feet away from the building and parking itself.
Thank you, Bill. So we also have amenity standards. This was brought up to us by one of our town council members. They expressed a desire to have amenities as a required part of subdivisions, proposed subdivisions. This was included as part of our original subdivision control ordinance. However, those requirements did not carry over into our new UDO, and there was a desire expressed to have those reintroduced. So what we've done here with the amenity standards is basically take all of those standards from the previous subdivision control ordinance as they relate to amenity standards and include them in Chapter 7, which regulates subdivisions in our UDO. And then there's several I didn't make slides for, but there were references to State Road 267 throughout our ordinance. We've changed those to Avon Avenue. There were residential lot requirements for two-family, single-family attached, and multifamily dwelling lots in the R2 column of the bulk matrix. Two-family, single-family attached, and multifamily are not permitted uses in the R2 district. So we didn't see any reason to include lot standards for those. It led to confusion, so we've removed those
Cleaning
as
it up.
well.
Well, what had happened was when the UDO went, so you all forwarded it with a favorable recommendation to the council. And the council reviewed it and they identified some permitted uses in the R2 zoning district that they didn't like. And they stripped out those permitted uses. What we failed to do is take the development standards for those uses out of the ordinance itself as well. And what happened was I was getting requests over and over for two-family dwelling subdivisions in the R2 zoning district. And I would keep telling people, hey, why are you doing this? It's not a permitted use. And they said, well, you got standards for them in your ordinance. I went, oh, yeah, you're right, we do. So we took those ordinances, we took those standards out of the ordinance.
Again, pet rules where pets are not allowed.
Exactly.
Then lastly, we had mobile home parks use standards. We were directed by our legal counsel to update those standards, which we have done as part of this text amendment. And then lastly, townhouse parking location. Our current ordinance requires the parking to be backloaded onto alleys. The town of Avon has a severe lack of alleys throughout it, so it's not really an implementable standard. So we've allowed front or street side yard parking locations for townhomes when they do not abut an alley, for clarification there.
And so far, all the townhome developments that anyone has approached us for have gotten their direct access from the public street in front. We haven't had a single development proposed that has alleys in it yet. I still have hope.
And that's all I've got for our UDO text amendment. I'm available for questions.
I do have a question on the amenity centers. Could you just give a couple of examples of like what some of those standards are?
Sure, let me pull them up for you.
One of how this came up, it's the development attaches to Turner Trace. And so they use the enhanced architectural standards, Brookstone. I always forget what the name of that development is. What's that? Bellwood, that's what it is. There's too many B's in here. They platted under the new ordinance, and the new ordinance required them to have 5% open space, but didn't require any improvements at all in the open space. The old ordinance was similar in that it had a requirement for a certain amount of open space, but if you hit a lot threshold, you had to start populating that open space with things, parks, game courts, trails. In most cases, it was simply a picnic shelter and some trails, but a lot of people have done other things. Well, there's no requirement for that for Bellwood. And so one of the council members noticed that and said, hey, why didn't they have to install any amenities? And we said, well, they didn't really have to. And he said, well, I would prefer if the developments did have to do that. So we just took the old standards out of the subdivision control ordinance, We cleaned them up a little because there was a lot of detail in those ordinances that was probably excessive in the old subdivision control ordinance. So we cleaned them up a little. So we do have a minimal sort of requirement for developing the amenities inside a common area at the request of the council.
Okay, I understand now.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I was misunderstanding what amenity centers was. I thought was that like a clubhouse or?
Oh, well,
Or was
So
it could very well be.
It varies.
Yeah.
So for residential subdivisions with the parent tract greater than 80 acres or over 140 dwellings, you'll be required to add a neighborhood park, or a sport court, or other amenity centers, a nature center, a standard facility. These are all defined in here, and when they apply.
Okay.
What we do in the town, so you have, 3 or 4 distinct types of parks. You have neighborhood parks, community parks, or regional parks, usually, something like that. And some parks departments try to provide all of that, right? So in Indianapolis, Indy Parks, for instance, will try to provide neighborhood parks, community parks, or regional parks. They're just bigger parks. What the town does is try to force neighborhoods to provide neighborhood parks themselves, and then we concentrate on providing regional and community parks, bigger parks like the town hall park and other sorts of things. So that's the policy that we're articulating in the ordinance. Neighborhood, you have to provide your own neighborhood park. We'll provide you a community park. We'll provide you a regional park.
Great. Thank you.
Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, do we have a motion?
I move that we.
Wait,
Oh, I'm sorry.
we
I'm
need
sorry.
public hearing.
Apologize. Is there anybody present who'd like to speak on this agenda item?
Good evening. My name is Brandon Wilson, 8093 East County Road 100 North. And my comment is on the UDO, number 34. The new gasoline service station addition to the UDO. So this was previously number 23, I guess, on that list and within the 3.3 use limitations. This used to fall under the automobile services light. Excuse me, sorry. So I know previously this was 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and the new proposal is 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. And within that, there was also an 8-foot setback for the structures next to residential. And I know in the new proposal, there are no setbacks stated. Again, I think anybody proposing to put in a gas station next to residential, there has to be some type of buffer there. If they're coming in doing a commercial development of some kind, they can implement whatever plan they want to eliminate the residential piece of this. But excluding any type of buffer, I think it is going to make it difficult for a resident to accept the fact that a gas station's going in right next door to them. So, and unfortunately with today's gas stations, 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., generally speaking, that's not the mom and pop gas stations anymore. These are going to be full service, coffee, breakfast, dinners, things like that, from open to close. So most of the time you're probably preparing 3 to 4 a.m. And then sometimes closing down after. You're going to be in the midnight hours. So I think next to residential, again, there's going to be a lot of traffic. I look at the breakdown of the current UDO. And as I go through some of these, there's a lot of setbacks spelled out. Some of them, on the higher, I guess, bigger projects, sanitary sewer treatment plants, 500 feet, solid waste facilities, 500 feet. But you do get into some of the smaller, what I would say, there's a number 11 parks and playgrounds. Any recreation facility not completely enclosed, a basketball or a racquetball court, must have at least 50 feet boundary between residential and this type of setting. So, kind of looking at those things, I feel like some of these things are spelled out to where you have, residents have a buffer. Like number 19, when you're kind of looking at the, I guess it's letter D there, where located abutting a residential district, a minimum of 50-foot wide landscape buffer must be provided, and that's animal sales and services. And so on, I think. But then I think number 1 on the list, in that 3.3 section, even states that stables and riding pens are permitted on lots greater than 1 acre, and size and must be located at least 200 feet from a residential property line. So again, if I'm in an area which, have a property that is, I'm going to be more okay with a horse property, next to my property than I am a gas station from open to close in the evening. So I know there are a lot of districts, towns around, I guess, where there is a buffer, generally, in most cases, 100, 150 feet buffer minimum between residential and gas stations. Some have gone to 300 to 500. I know Carmel implemented a 500-foot setback between pump islands and their pumps, and also vent pipes from their underground storage tanks. So anyway, I just wanted to comment on that piece. I think something should be considered to provide a buffer for residential properties and gas stations in this addition to the UDO. Thank you for your time.
So we do currently have a buffer that would exist, right? So a gas station would be a commercial use. It's proposed to be permitted in C2 and I2. In both of those cases, between that commercial land use and the residential, they would require a 30-foot landscape buffer with a year-round screening with evergreen trees or fences or
So even though
whatever.
there's not a buffer specifically attached
To
to
the use
the gas
limitations.
station, it is within the zoning.
We don't have a specific buffer for a gasoline service station as enumerated in the use limitations. But in chapter 6 of the ordinance, we have a general landscape buffer that's required between commercial industrial uses and residential uses. So if you have an area that's zoned R2 or AG, and you have an area that's zoned C2, and they want to develop that C2 piece, they have to install a 30-foot wide buffer. And you've heard that, in fact, this evening, you heard a waiver of that standard between the R2 piece and the
From 30 to 27 and a half.
of Harvest Landing. And that was with a solid year-round screen, at least 8 foot high, evergreen trees, shrubs planted at a rate of 1 tree or shrub every 30 feet along the yard's length, and so on and so forth. So the ordinance does have a general buffer yard in between a commercial use like a gasoline service station and a residential use. There's also requirements for lighting as far as full cutoff and 0 feet encroachment at the property line, and there's also standards of lighting underneath the canopy. So we do have some standards in the ordinance to control some of the externalities associated with gasoline service stations.
Okay.
I think the commenter also said that under auto light, the one that was previously used, that a buffer was defined. Is there a reason that it would be defined there? But
It's right here, Bill. It says it's 8 feet.
yeah,
It's
that's even
curious
lo-
that it does.
That's less than the 30 feet.
That's less than the
Right, so
minimum
that's worse.
side yard setback, not including the landscape buffer.
Yeah.
So it is peculiar why they have
The
that
structure
in
housing, the
there.
primary use must be set back at least 8 feet from a residential district.
But in C2, the side setback is 10 feet, but you also would be required to have a 30-foot setback, so.
This sounds like a conflict of laws question,
Yeah,
Mr.
it sounds
Taylor.
like we need to amend the ordinance to take something out again because, yeah, it's an unnecessary.
Yeah, that was my curiosity is like, what's the rule for when you have one listed specifically or it's covered by the
Most
other chapter?
restrictive applies.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most restrictive. The ordinance specifies that when you've got two standards in conflict with one another, the more restrictive one applies.
Okay,
And so, yeah, we would use the more restrictive one.
makes sense.
Didn't always say that, just when Bill came along, we made it say
It's so permissive.
One comment. Should it be titled gasoline service stations, or should it be titled C stores? They're known now more as C stores that serve gas.
Yeah, well,
Or added to it /C stores.
You
and
really
that-
don't see
yeah.
anything, any C store that does not also sell gas.
True.
Yeah.
But when I look at gasoline service stations, the old days,
Yeah.
an old gasoline
Well, and
service.
you really don't see gas stations that only sell gas either.
So let me ask you a question, seeing it was on the agenda and it was asked for a continuance. The C store on Avon Avenue, would this be part of this amendment, this change would be tied into that request?
Yeah, if the ordinance gets approved if the ordinance amendment gets approved before the development plan review petition gets approved.
Thank you.
If that makes sense.
Yep, thanks.
Any further questions or comments on staff's request for text amendments? Do I hear a motion?
I move that we forward a favorable recommendation to the town council for ZA 23-03 UDO text amendment, November 2023. A zoning text amendment for various updates and corrections to the town of Avon Unified Development Ordinance, since it has satisfied all the requirements for a zoning text amendment under state law, subject to no conditions.
Second.
Okay. Let's take a vote.
Catherine Ranswick,
4,
Paul Kuchenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Jennifer Spencer,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Greg Zuzen.
4.
Motion passes.
Looks like we have no new business, but we do have other business.
Well, I got one other thing to add, and this really is not something for your action, which I'll handle first. There are 4 members of the Plan Commission whose terms expire in December. I believe it's Mr. Reed, Mr. Kaufman, Ms. Ransberg, and Mr. Guckenberger. What we would like to know, you all could email me or email Ryan of your willingness to stay on for another term. And we would like you to. So, I mean, that's what we would prefer, that you all stay on for another term. But your term does expire on December 31st. If you're willing to stay, email us, tell us yay or nay, and then we'll go through the process to get you reappointed. Assuming the council has no objections, of course.
All in favor, say aye.
No, so that is the element for each one of you as individuals to look in your conscience to tell us what you want. But we would be more than happy to have you stay on the Plan Commission. Matter of fact, we would prefer it.
As a council member, probably sometimes subject to public opinion, I think you guys do a great job. And it's hard, you always want change, but, you've got some of these boards and commissions, you can't have a wholesale change because you lose that continuity and that intellectual memory and all these meetings we sit through and all the petitioners and all the public comments that we hear. So you do a great job. And so if you want, I would recommend you all say yes.
Well, and I can tell you, as a person who's dealing with a municipality that shall go unnamed, but it is about an hour north up 69, that is extremely difficult to work with. Every time I come into these meetings, I just breathe a sigh of relief because it's so pleasant. And even when we disagree, we still like each other. So this is, I am very proud of the work that our committee does and of how we work with each other and with our colleagues. So.
And then the other item on the agenda, and this one does require your, official action by the commission, and that is the calendar year 2024 Plan Commission meetings. The only real curveball, it's pretty standard, first Monday or the month, I think, or I'm sorry, the last Monday of the month. However, on May, it is not. It's a Tuesday in May. So that's really the only strange thing about this particular calendar as opposed to calendars in the past. The May meeting is May 28th, which is a Tuesday rather than a Monday meeting. And I believe that's because of Memorial Day.
Yes, that's correct.
So just have a question. Is 6:30 still good for everybody? Because I know we've gone 7 and back 6:30. Yeah. It's better. I mean, I come from Carmel and I make sure I get here because of meetings going long. I think it's
My
better.
very first meeting ran until after 11 o'clock.
I'll move that we
I
approve
figured I was being hazed.
I move we approve the 2024 meeting schedule for the Plan Commission.
I'll second that.
Take a vote.
Catherine Ranger,
4.
Paul Kuchenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Jennifer Spencer, Rick Stockton,
4.
Jared Lee.
4.
Motion carried.
And there is one other item that I have to tell you for informational purposes only, and that is your next meeting is December 19th. And we, as the staff, also scheduled the Board of Zoning Appeals for December 19th as well. So the workaround on that is the Board of Zoning Appeals will meet at 6:30. They have one item on the agenda that they're going to review. And as soon as that item, meeting has concluded, we'll roll right into the Plan Commission. I don't anticipate, so in other words, the Plan Commission meeting in December, we want to start that right around 7. And that's what we've identified. That's what we have notified that to in the newspaper, that December meeting for the Plan Commission will start at 7. Presuming the Board of Zoning Appeals finishes their their meeting in a half hour. They got one item. It shouldn't take much more than a half hour,
December
but
19th.
just maybe. See, I jinxed it.
That's a Tuesday,
Yeah, it's a Tuesday.
not Monday.
No, because we've changed that one because I believe it's the RDC has a meeting on that Monday. So the RDC has a meeting. The December meetings get a little hinky because the council changes their meetings and we usually have to work around that. But then the RDC had a meeting because of the way Christmas fell this year. So that's the reason this calendar is getting all sort of messed up in December.
So BZA and Plan Commission are both on the 19th.
On the 19th, they'll be right here. BZA will start at 6:30. Plan Commission, we anticipate starting at 7, but they'll start immediately after the BZA is complete.
Committee reports. I know there was no BZA meeting this month.
RDC. In addition to our invoice approvals, we added for the month more information in regards to County Road 100 South updates and the Dan Jones widening update progress. In addition to the annual report to the taxing entities, awarding of a demolition quote, and a public hearing and resolution modifying and the confirmatory resolution accordingly regards Easton Gray.
Any other committees? Town council?
Before we adjourn, I would just like to ask you all to sign all of the documents here. Last month, we all ran out of here in a hurry because it ran late, I believe.
You were the presider, so you should have
We-
a couple of DPR.
We have findings and then the minutes must be signed by everyone present here, so. I'm gonna try and be an enforcer moving forward here. I'm gonna stand by the door and block you guys from leaving. For the sake of like keeping records and stuff, be sure we have all of our signed documents. So please remember to do that. That's all I got.
Okay, and if there's no further business for the good of the order, this meeting is adjourned.